Check, check.
Check, check.
We Gucci, we Gucci. So, when we last left off, book burned bad. Maybe has something to do with killer? Let's find out.
Objection!
Pursuing the matter further would be a flagrant waste of the court's time, as you well know. Ah. Yes, I'm afraid, counsel, I must concur with the prosecution on this matter. When I afforded you this opportunity, you led the court to believe that the evidence in question contained a hitherto undiscovered clue. But I must insist that you elaborate, counsel. You will identify this clue at once. Do I make myself clear? Oh, yes, my lord. It's, Mr. Naruhodo. I believe the prosecution is trying to avoid a thorough examination of the evidence, which means you may very well be on the right track. Yes, I think you might be right. So, counsel, precisely where is the vital clue to this case which this fourth book conceals? Oh, it's this huge burnt bit. Thank you, Plasticop, for the 7 months. Excuse me.
Got it!
I would ask the court to observe the back of the book in question. The back? What are you? Good gracious! It's been burnt to a crisp. So we have to ask ourselves, why was the victim clutching what is clearly an unreadable book? It is undeniably an extremely unnatural thing for her to have been doing.
Objection!
Unnatural, you say? And what of it, my Nipponese friend? Oh. Were I to concede the point, if it bears no relation to the case, there is nothing to discuss. So should you wish to assert that this fire damage is some veiled clue as to what happened that day, pray do enlighten us all. What truth does this charred book hide? A charred book. There's just one possibility here, which I can't quite bring myself to rule out. It's an outside chance, certainly, but worth a try. Alright, I'll explain my theory. Don't keep us waiting any longer then, counsel. Explain this theory of yours. What are you suggesting that you can ascertain from the fire damage this sorry tome has suffered? Its owner. My lord, the burn on the back of this book reveals a startling truth about the book's owner. I beg your pardon. But we already know who the book belongs to. The victim was gripping it in her hand as she fell to the floor after all. It's obviously hers. The question of how this book came to be in the victim's hand has yet to be answered. However, As to the questions of who the book really belongs to and where it originated, the defense has very credible answers. Excuse me. Maybe I should spin this thing. I'm drinking a beer, and I have it in a koozie because I used to get given these like things for free whenever I would go to like job fairs and whatnot, because there is a correct stereotype that most software developers are alcoholics or smoking addicts, for lack of a better word. I don't know what the word would be for like a cigarette addict. My vice of choice was alcohol. I actually drink responsibly and stuff. I've never been like crazy. But the thing I was going to get to is there's like branding on this thing, and I just realized I don't want to promote this company because I have no idea what they do. I got their thing for free at a job fair like years ago. Good gracious, how can you possibly? Very well, I'll play along with this futile attempt to delay your inevitable demise. Do remember, the members of the jury may well burn you if your little gamble goes awry. Counsel, the defense's response here is very likely to influence the final outcome of the trial. So tell the court, who do you claim is the owner of this burnt book? Where is... Here he is. The answer is that the book belongs to the couple who own the house where the defendant has his lodgings. A certain Mr. and Mrs. Garrideb. The landlords? And whether this is some extraordinary coincidence or some kind of fate at work, I don't know, but of all the people in London, one of the 6 chosen for jury duty in this courtroom today is none other than Mrs. Garrideb herself. Oh my goodness, me? I think you must be mistaken, sir. I'm not Mr. Garrideb's wife, I'm his maid. Things would be so much easier if you would just drop the pretense. Alright then, how about a simple question for you? Have you ever seen this book in Mr. Garrideb's house? I would never presume to know all the books he keeps, sir. This is outlandish behavior. This woman is the accused landlady, you say? You implicate this hard-working member of the public. You besmirch her without a shred of evidence. Your actions are unforgivable. This is not mere conjecture. The defense happens to know that on the day in question, at almost exactly the same time as the victim was stabbed on the pavement below, another incident was taking place in the room on the top floor of Mr. and Mrs. Garrideb's house. Good lord, what sort of incident, counsel? A fire, my lord. Afraid to say it was, happened in the blink of an eye, you know. The whole place filled with smoke, couldn't see a bally thing. Didn't take long for the fire to spread, of course. The bally furniture started going up as well. Worst of it is, I lost my favorite book called The Lion's Pride. Lion's Pride? By Jove, the very same title that's the subject of this debate. Oh dear me. This is risible. All you've told the court is that a book by the same name was involved in a fire, in which case it would be reasonable to assume that it was burnt to ashes. And entirely unreasonable to infer that it magically removed itself to the scene of the crime. Oh, so this book at the scene of the crime also just magically got burned right before this lady presumably bought it, if it wasn't picked up at the scene of the crime. Like, it goes the other way, too. Perhaps it would make more sense if I told you that the cause of the fire was marital discord. Without going into details, it appears that Mrs. Garrideb was considerably enraged. Apparently she continued to attack Mr. Garrideb even amid the flames. Oh, how awful. I can't even imagine being so horrid to the one you love. Can you, Raleigh? Absolutely not, Sa. My Patricia would never raise a finger against me, Sa. Had all my favorite old novels in that case. But as soon as the fire got hold of them, that was it. Whoosh, up in smoke. Then the wife started hurling things at me. There was I, backed up against the window, under heavy enemy fire, incendiary books incoming 10s to the dozen. The man had his back up against the window, and he had burning books thrown at him? Goodness gracious, are you suggesting that the book was thrown through a window and landed coincidentally at the scene of the crime? No, a thorough investigation of the surrounding area was conducted the very evening of the incident. There was no report of the Garrideb's window pane being broken. That's quite true. We also saw no sign of broken glass when we visited the Garrideb household. But I just noticed my door is open. I will be right back. All right. Okay. Back to this. But is it not conceivable that the window was open at the time, and it is winter, right? Not even remotely. Let us not forget the season and the chilling weather that accompanies it. No Londoner would ever leave a window open in the middle of winter, even if there was a fire burning. Does the defense postulate the scenario in all seriousness, counsel? Do you earnestly claim that the book was found at the scene was a flaming projectile thrown by Mr. Garrideb's wife? I mean, yes. I believe it's a possibility, my lord. I think it's more than a possibility. That's quite enough. Well, I hope that everyone can see you for what you are now, you little foreign trickster. You call yourself a lawyer, but you're just a coward. A mean coward. Really? Claiming that our little tiff set the whole neighborhood alight, honestly. Implying that I'm merely posing as a maid for appearance's sake? How could you? It's nothing to do with this beastly case, not any of it. All you've done is sully our family's name. No, I assure you that was never my intention, but you have also incidentally revealed that you are the wife of Mr. Garrideb. Dragging an upstanding citizen's name through the mud simply to divert attention from your failing defense. I should box your ears, that's what I should do. It's utterly unforgivable. Too right. Here we go. No longer we sat here now listening to this Nipponese spouting out his fancy foreign theories. But think about it. At the end of the day, the only person who could possibly have stabbed the victim is that little hunchback with the mustache, and he ran away from the scene too. I do declare you're right. It's true. Yes, what did I tell you? Makes sense to me. Sorry, what's that? Well, it would appear that the ladies and gentlemen of the jury are once again in full agreement. What is your position, Lord Van Zieks? In truth, my lord, I feel these have been unnecessarily protracted proceedings, but then, we must always exercise patience in order to savor the best vintage. No, wait. The mystery of the fourth book still hasn't been... If books are your predilection, my learned friend, study them on your own time. Did he just object with his foot? Or not object, but... What, no forgive the discourtesy this time? In that case, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will now state your individual decisions regarding the defendant's culpability for the court to hear.
Guilty. 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 Guilty.
Thank you for that unambiguous response. That's twice now. It's over. Mr. Naruhodo, don't give up. Miss Susato, have you forgotten? The battle isn't over yet. You're not suggesting another summation examination? You believe you still have tricks up your sleeve? I don't intend to trick anybody. I intend to uncover the truth. This is no time to be downcast. As long as there's a chance, I have to stay strong and determined. Excuse. Trial Part 2. I've considered the defense counsel's request for a further summation examination of the jury, and I have determined that the court must uphold the defense's judicial right to this procedure. So, counsel, you will now proceed with your second summation examination. I presume the jury is ready, Mr. Foreman? I mean, we've already established, if not that she is, like, potentially a, like, suspect in this case, juror number 4 has a conflict of interest in that she is, like, involved in or adjacent to the case. Should she not be dismissed from the jury anyway? We are, my lord. Very good. In that case, I must ask each of you now to state clearly and concisely for the court the grounds on which you find the defendant guilty of this crime. The accused left behind evidence at the scene, didn't he? Those 3 books of his. There was some novel alternative explanation about how the victim was stabbed I might reconsider. Even if the woman was throwing books, it can't be related to this crime if the window was closed, can it? Dearie me, it was only a little book, hardly life-threatening even with a direct hit. Look, I just want to get this over with. If I don't bring home some pay tonight, I'll be in a tidy bit of trouble. Come to think of it, we had a fire at home a while ago. It gave me the sneezes. Yes, considerably more tangible arguments from all members of the jury this time around, it seems. With one notable exception, of course. My learned student friend was unable to find fault in the previous witness testimony. So the court must accept the fact that it was indeed the accused seen fleeing from the scene. We have always accepted that, and moreover, no one else was even at the scene to commit the crime. Well, if the eyewitnesses are correct, it would seem as if the conclusion is somewhat set in stone. I fail to see how it can be argued any other way. I mean, I'm afraid that during the summation examination, it's essential that you establish some other tangible explanation for the facts. But how? What would even constitute a tangible explanation here? Isn't it obvious? Who stabbed the woman and how? Those 2 details are all you need provide. Simply give us a name and a method by which the attack was conducted. And there I was thinking this might be hard. Mr. Naruhodo, you have to do it, otherwise this really will be where the trial ends. No pressure, then. I mean, we already know, right? It's like the lady who is the wife but pretends to be a maid was throwing stuff. She probably threw a knife and, like, stabbed the guy. It's quite enough preamble. Proceed with the summation examination, please. Presume you are prepared, counsel? Oh, yes, my lord. Focus your mind now. Clearly, the key to this summation examination is going to be juror number 4, the maid, or should I say Miss Garrideb. We have a book that disappeared from the Garrideb's house on the evening of the incident, and the 4th book found in the victim's hand. There must be a way to link the two. Yes, that's what we have to find. Using every technique I've learned in my short career so far, whatever it takes. Don't forget to keep an eye on Miss Garrideb and how she reacts, even to the things other people say. Okay, so they're basically dropping a hint that Mrs. Garrideb is going to respond to somebody else's jury statement. The cues left behind evidence at the scene, those 3 books of his. I don't think we'll get anything out of that just yet. But what about the possibility that the window was open? What about it? I mean, there's just no way it could have been. How can you be so sure? Prosecutor fellow over there said it earlier, didn't he? Winters in London are no joke. You don't want to invite that sort of cold indoors. So no, that window wasn't open. Us Londoners like sitting by the fire and staying warm, see? You couldn't categorically state that the window wasn't open, could you? It just wasn't. They wouldn't have opened it. And what's the point of even having windows, huh? Counsel, you will kindly refrain from childish bickering. Oh, sorry. Somehow I need to show there's an undeniable possibility the window was open. This young man isn't going to budge otherwise. But the little book was on fire at the time, was it not? With flames of love, I'll have you know. There's really no such thing as a loving incendiary bomb. Well, he brought it upon himself. It's playing with fire to betray a fiery love, isn't it? Well, don't you agree? Oh, well, any kind of betrayal is certainly a bad thing, yes. But I think the argument may have arisen out of your misunderstanding, Mrs. Garrideb. Never you mind that. The point is we were just having a jovial little dispute, nothing more. And I won't have any more of these suggestions that it was anything whatsoever to do with this crime. Alright, well, we'll see about that, but what about juror number 5? He doesn't seem to be turning a hair at Mrs. Garrideb's relentless onslaughts. It's almost as though he's used to it. What a gentle soul he is. You just want to get this over with? How can you sit there and say something like that? A man's future is at stake here. Well, him and me both then, like I said before. What? I told you already, I'm a day laborer, aren't I? If I don't bring home some readies with me tonight, you'll find me floating face down in the Thames tomorrow morning. What? You heard me. My missus isn't one to mess about, you know. She can be fierce, believe you me. Another shining example of marital bliss, then. A situation like this cropped up the other day. It was, well, Do you know, it's funny, but I can't quite remember. Sorry. It was too frightening, that's the thing. I must have blocked it out. Helpful. I wonder if Mr. Beat will ever be dragged into the Thames by his scarf. Don't even go there, Miss Susato. There must be some way to jog his memory about this. Come to think of it, we had a fire at home a while ago. It gave me the sneezes. Does that have anything to do with your decision about the defendant's culpability in this case? Sorry, what's that? You'll have to speak up, lad. Could you tell us more about that fire? It was last winter. My grandchildren baked me a lovely cake on my birthday. It had 75 candles on top, it did. What a sight to behold it was. You put candles on a cake? Was it some kind of devil worship? Of course not. It was an angel cake to celebrate my birthday, obviously. It seems that's a common custom here in Great Britain, Mr. Naruhodo. Anyway, I mustered all my puff to blow them out. Only I must have blown wrong somehow. The flames didn't go out, but the candles went flying all over the room. The furniture caught and everything went up. The whole place filled up with smoke. Definitely sounds like devil worship to me. And by the sneezes, I presume you mean a cold, but how did you catch a cold from a fire? What a fiasco it was. The grandchildren, bless them, threw water over me as they tried to put out the flames. And then because the whole room had filled up with smoke, of course, we had to open all the windows to clear it.
Excuse me.
I think I did that by accident. Alright, so I think we need to go back to juror number 6.
Hold it.
Let's ask about the books thing. But as we now know, there were 4 books, not 3. Well, what difference does it make? There's every possibility that the 4th book in fact belongs to the defendant's landlord. Yes, that's the part I have a problem with. Sorry. Well, at the point the woman was stabbed, this landlord fellow was at home, wasn't he? Enjoying a fiery scrap with his wife or something, you said? It's not exactly how I put it, no. Well, anyway, the point is, the fellow and his wife were somewhere else when it happened. I think that's what you call a strong alibi. So it couldn't have been the landlord who did it, which only leaves the Nipponese fellow. Honestly, I can't see what all this palaver's about. It's a done deal, isn't it? I suppose it is, since I have nothing witty left to say.
Hold it.
So, you might be willing to change your decision, you mean? Oh my, such delight on your face, but I'm afraid I shan't be swayed by emotion. Despite what you may think of me, I am a very modern, metropolitan, and rational woman. That's great. One reads the morning papers, it's all forgotten by tea time, isn't it? So why read them in the first place? You see, modern, metropolitan, and rational thinking, wouldn't you say? And not at all extreme. As I see it, an overwhelmingly suspicious Japanese man has been implicated by overwhelmingly strong testimony. So despite 1 or 2 minor puzzlements, I do declare that the man is overwhelmingly guilty. Modern, metropolitan, and rational logic, wouldn't you say? Overwhelmingly. But us modern gals are always delighted to embrace new fads, you know? So I'd be only happy to consider an exciting new theory if you could come up with one. I'd be happy to do that too, if only I could. I mean, we have it, but... So let's listen to this guy in full. I'll try to skip ahead to the parts we haven't already read. I had to open all the windows to clear it. The windows? The biting winter air rushed all over me like the devil dancing on my grave, it did. I caught a terrible cold from it and put me in a hospital for a while. I won't forget that birthday in a hurry. I knew it was devil worship all along, but something about this old man's story was playing on my mind for some reason. I mean, now that we've pressed him to say... Let's pit these two against each other. These two juror statements clearly contradict one another. They do? How exactly, counsel? Don't point at me again, I told you it wasn't me. Huh? What's that, you say? Speak up, lad, speak up. Juror number 3, do you see? Oh, me? See what, sir? Did you hear juror number 6's account of his birthday celebrations last year? It seems, despite being a Londoner, he once opened his windows in the middle of winter. Well, yes, of course, because it was an emergency. I mean, obviously, if the room was filled with smoke from a fire, then you'd be mad not to open the... Oh! Exactly. On the day in question, at the time of the incident, there was a fire in the Garrideb household. And Mr. Garrideb had the following to say about it. The whole place filled with smoke. Oh, my hat.
Excuse me.
That's a lot of tea you're drinking. Juror number 4, do you have something to say about that? Mrs. Garrideb. Oh, dearie me. What is the meaning of this? How dare you imply that I'm hiding who I really am? It's imperative that you confirm something for the court, so please, it's time to drop the pretense now. What is it? When the fire started in your house that day, did you or your husband open the window? What? I beg your pardon? What are you insinuating? The room would have been thick with smoke after the carpet and bookcase caught fire as they did. In a situation like that, it's inconceivable that you wouldn't have opened the window. And what if we did? Oh, alright then. Yes, you're right. My husband was frantically trying to open the window. Which can't have been easy since I continued to give him a justly deserved book battering. Jeez. Even though your house was on fire? But you never stopped throwing until the anger subsides. It would be terribly bad for the nerves to do otherwise. Of course, I should have realized. That's a significant step forward, Mr. Naruhodo. You managed to establish that the window was open. Simply must have that added to Mrs. Garrideb's formal statement. We should also go ahead and like pit these two against each other to get them marked as not guilty. I'm sorry, but as foreman of the jury, I have to object. That's complete nonsense. What? Oh, banker, don't forget, an educated man, and there's no contradiction. Okay. So even though we already had this discussion, nothing whimsical about it. Very important to listen carefully to every juror, Mr. Naruhodo, then you can decide where the contradiction... Yeah, I get it. I didn't actually need to do what I just did. I got it.
Hold it.
The fourth book found at the scene of the crime shows very obvious signs of fire damage, and the title of the book is The Lion's Pride, the same title, in fact, as the book that Mr. Garrideb told us he had been reading. Well, I really couldn't say. On the day in question, did you or did you not throw at your husband the copy of The Lion's Pride that he had been reading? I did. It was the first thing I could lay my hands on, so I hurled it straight at him. And now that you come to mention it, yes. He was rather enjoying reading it, you're right. Why did you not reveal this information to the court from the outset? Because I couldn't, you insolent little man. I didn't remember. At times like that, you pick up and throw whatever you can lay your hands on, as well you know. I really don't. I barely noticed I was throwing a book, much less the title of it. What's going on with you? What is it, juror number 5? You know something? I've remembered what it was. That memory I've blocked out. It was listening to what this granny was saying brought it all flooding back. Who are you calling a granny, you cheeky devil? I'm Mrs. Garrideb, or the maid, I'll have you know. The man doesn't even flinch. Please tell me that's not because he's so used to being hit all the time. It was about 2 weeks ago now. I just got back home after work, I put my hand in my pocket for the wages I just earned that day, and I nearly died. There was a hole. Every last penny had dropped out. Oh dear, what a disaster. You haven't heard the half of it, boy. Oh? The wife was cutting up some chicken at the time. I could hardly get the words out, but I told her straight. I've lost the day's wages, love. Next thing I knew, the blade was whistling past my ear. Stuck into the wall next to me, it did, about an inch deep. No words, just terror. I could smell it then, you know, that god-awful stench of the Thames. I was sure I was going to end up face down in the muddy banks the next night, I could tell you. No, that's a real disaster, isn't it? I'll never use the word lightly again. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is this. When women lose their rag, they'll throw anything at you. Knives, hatchets, hammers, you name it. Mr. Naruhodo, you mustn't think that all women are so short-tempered and unrefined. No, I wasn't thinking that. Throwing household objects at people as well, it's so uncivilized. At least attack with honor, use a bow or the like. What? Attack? Who are you going to attack? Never mind, anyway, this man's words could be rather significant, I think. Alright, we'll come back to the bow and arrow thing later if I dare. I'll press on a few of these. She was chopping meat with it, had a tidy edge on it, believe me. Still, it's all memories, isn't it? It started with that smile she threw me when we were courting, and since then the list of things she's thrown at me has grown along with our relationship. There was a cup, then a glass, then a pot, a kettle, a chair, a wardrobe, a cooker, a bathtub. Your wife must be even beefier than you. But things came to a head last week when she threw me right into the Thames. Still, she's not so bad when she's calmed down. She's a little sweetheart, really. I am so happy for you. You want to know what I think? This whole idea of ladies first that we're so obsessed with in the country was thought up by some clever lads who'd been tossed into the Thames a few too many times by their wives. That's a very interesting theory. What a terrible thought. On the face of it, this juror's statement just sounds like a really extreme anecdote. I think it might turn out to be an extremely powerful weapon. A weapon I might be able to use to make the jurors accept an alternative explanation here.
Hold it!
I'm gonna skip past to the stuff we haven't read. Right, totally understandable. I mean, you can't waste time deciding what to use yet next. You fail the way I did, you don't care what it is, you just want to smash it into his face. see where violence can lead, Miss Susato. I'm disheartened to think you might think me capable of such behavior.
Hold it!
You know, there was a small house fire in the Meredith household on the opposite side of the street. Well, yes, it certainly seems that way, and on account of the smoke, I imagine they would have had the windows wide open in spite of the cold. We also know that Mrs. Garrett was throwing flaming books at her husband. Her husband, who was backed into a corner by the window due to his wife's frenzied attack. Yes, that's right. So there's definitely a chance that one of the books could have flown past the man and out of the window. Only what? I mean, I can't really see how it could have gone all the way over to the other side of the road, that's all. Ah. So I don't really see how I can change my decision, really. Oh, I see. That wasn't enough? What's it going to take to persuade these people? So obviously this statement needs to contest with something else. Let's try these. These two statements clearly have a deeply significant connection. Good grief, you mean they don't contradict each other? Explain, counsel, at once. Juror number 2, do you think that perhaps that this could be one such novel alternative? Oh my, whatever do you mean? An alternative explanation as to how the victim was stabbed in the back. What are you talking about? We've demonstrated that the fourth book, The Lion's Pride, that was found at the scene of the crime originated in Mr. Garrett's room on the top floor of his house. Therefore, it's equally possible that some other object besides the book could have found its way from the Garrett household to the streets below. What's that now? After all, Mrs. Garrett could have thrown any number of different objects at her husband. Isn't that right, juror number 4? What are you insinuating now, you little beanpole? I'm beginning to think that ever since the true origins of this book came to light, perhaps she's had a feeling this might be what happened. Now you listen here, you Eastern Galah. As the foreman of this jury, I demand a straight answer. You give us this yarn about some other object making its way out of the house, but what? What was it? I'm really taking a big gamble here. That was a bold accusation to make, but I haven't had any real evidence to back it up. But I'm certain that at the very least this warrants further investigation. Alright, Mr. Foreman, I'll try to explain the defense's theory. The other object that's found its way from the Garrett's household to the scene of the crime was... this knife. Juror number 4, Mrs. Garrett. What now? I must apologize in advance for this, but I need you to confirm something else for the court. This knife. Have you ever seen this knife before? Ah, good lord, counsel, what on earth are you doing? That's the weapon that was lodged in the victim's back, man. Well, thanks for giving away the game before we could get a confirmation. My lord, remember that when the victim was attacked, Mr. and Mr. Garrett were in the throes of an argument. Mrs. Garrett was hurling anything she could at her husband, who had been backed up against the window that had been opened to clear the smoke, through which a book sailed to land at the crime scene. You can't seriously believe that. The book was found in the victim's grasp. Are you saying that it flew out of the window and across the street to land neatly in her hand? Huh, even my missus hasn't got a name like that. Yes, I admit there are many details we don't yet understand, but that's the point. That's precisely why we must not allow this trial to end, not right now. Oh my, Ogg. Mrs. Garadev, your answer please. Have you seen this knife before or not? Oh, My lord. I wish to change my decision. I'm a woman of my word, after all. Thank you, madam. Yes, I agree. I certainly didn't see this coming, but I just don't think it would be right for this trial to come to an end now with so many unanswered questions. Mr. Foreman? I'd have to agree. Not that I think the granny did it, mind. Yes, you know what? I'm not quite happy about this at the moment either. All together now, ladies and gents. Interesting that juror number 6 did not change his verdict. We did it! Oh, congratulations, Mr. Naruhodo. So as a result of the defense's summation examination, a number of jurors' leanings have changed. 2 jurors call guilty against 4 now calling innocent. Accordingly, the opinion of this court is divided, and this trial will continue. Now then, Lord Van Zieks, how does the prosecution wish to proceed? This trial is rapidly descending into a farce. Like a corked wine, the first few sips are bitter enough. But what follows is so repugnant, it's good for nothing save the gutter. If I may, Lord Van Zieks, the defense has just put forward a credible alternative explanation for what happened. Credible? Is that your considered opinion, Mr. Foreman? The defense's argument is a joke to which I barely know how to respond, but let me start by insisting you must all familiarize yourselves better with the relative positions of those places being discussed. What do you mean by that? What's his angle this time? It should already be more than apparent that between the crime scene and the Garadev household, that's a rather wide street, Briar Road. But their place is on the top floor, which means the distance from the Garadev's house to the scene is some, yes, 15 yards. Let me see, 15 yards? That's around 14 meters. 14 meters? Oh, that's a little further than I'd imagined. And as you ladies and gentlemen of the jury rightly noted as having portentous significance, the 4th book was found in the victim's clutches. In other words, the smoldering book wantonly hurled by the lady of the house traveled some 15 yards to land on the opposite side of the road neatly between the collapsed victim's fingers and thumb. Is that your final conclusion, my learned and deluded friend? And did the jackknife follow a near identical trajectory to plunge into the middle of the victim's back? This fantasy is somewhat stretching the notion of having a bad day for the victim, I think. Even those pathetic serialized detective stories have more believable plots. I mean, did they just not know what height was at this point? That prosecutor loves the sound of his own voice. Miss Susato? Serialized detective stories are pathetic, are they? How dare he? Maybe let's pick our battles here. My lord, might I be allowed to speak? As judicial assistant, you may speak for the defense. Yes, go ahead. The prosecution may consider the idea of fantasy, but what the defense has postulated was believable enough to persuade the jury to change its leaning. and as such, the court has a duty to explore this alternative explanation as thoroughly as possible. To that end, juror number 4, Miss Joan Garadeb, must be called to testify and submit to cross-examination. Saints alive, a cross-examination of a juror? Order, order, order! This is highly irregular. Maybe this is why you shouldn't let people who are even close to a case testify or be jurors on it. It is unprecedented for a member of the jury to be summoned to the witness stand.
Objection!
And unnecessary. Lord Van Zieks. There are already witnesses in the stand whose testimony the defense may further cross-examine. If my learned friend's farcical theory has any truth to it, then both a burning book and a jackknife must have flown through the sky before this couple's eyes. And we must assume they would be able to testify accordingly. What say you, witnesses? Yes, sir, Constable Rolly Beat. Reporting for duty, sir. Well, good morning, officer. Sorry for dozing until now, sir. I haven't slept for a month on account of a villain who's appeared on my beat, sir. Oh, they are so heroic, these London bobbies. Patricia, my darling, I've been neglecting you, but no more. Oh, Rolly, my hero, you make me swoon. Very well, I hereby reject the defense's request. Oh, and order the witnesses in the stand to testify again. State forthwith before the court any details pertaining to the defense's alternative explanation of events. Would they know what it is if he's been sleeping the whole time? Yes, sir. Constable Beats report. This case has nothing to do with Mr. and Mrs. Garadeb. Believe me, a London bobby is good for his word. You see, sir, the windows on the top floor of the Garadeb house are top-hinged casements. Obviously, if anything had been thrown out of the window, we would have seen it. I did leave the scene to go and fetch help, but my trusty Rolly was there to make sure nothing was disturbed. I didn't take my eye off the crime scene for one moment, sir. Nothing strange to report on that front, sir. I mean, given his disposition, I feel it's very likely that he fell asleep. That detail was not in the police report, Constable. Yes, sorry about that. I must have been a little drowsy. Cannot excuse your sins with drowsiness every time, Constable. No, sir. Sorry, but what exactly is a top-hinged casement window? And you cannot excuse your ignorance with such trite remarks, my learned friend. How dare you not know the finer points of window architecture? Of course, sorry. I've found it, Mr. Naruhodo. Cast your mind back to the windows in Mr. and Mrs. Garadeb's room. Alright, I'll try. So the window opens in order to allow air to circulate inside the house. But as it's a top-hinged casement window, it swings open along the upper edge, you see. I'm glad you've rectified your ignorance. A casement window's most prominent feature is its stay, a metal bar which prevents the window from being opened beyond a certain amount. It prevents it opening? This is all news to me. Absolutely correct, sir. In other words, if a book or knife were to have been thrown through the open window, it would have clattered against the pane and fallen straight down to the pavement below. No. You see the problem then? Good, your education in Windows is complete. There's never any possibility of either the book or the knife traveling 15 yards over the road. That is, unless the window pane had been shattered, something we've discounted already. I mean, hear me out. What if the crime happened near the house, but the guard fell asleep, as he is known to do? And in that time, Mr. and Mrs. Garrideb moved the body across the street. That can't be. Did you see that, Rolly? That young Japanese man just collapsed in agony. Oh yes, my darling, I saw it. I saw how he crumbled before me. Oh, Rolly, you're so strong. How is this happening? I haven't even started the cross-examination yet and already my argument's been destroyed. Well, yeah, that's like how this works. They say things to contradict your theory and then you adjust your theory. The court awaits your cross-examination. My lord? Oh good, another desperate situation. You see, Sa, the windows on the top floor of the Garrideb household are top-hinged casements. Let's learn more about top-hinged casements. By which you mean they don't open fully, is that correct? Yes, Sa. They're just there to allow a bit of air through the house, you see, so they're restricted as to how much they open. And therefore, anything thrown out of the window from inside the room would simply strike the pane and fall to the street directly below. Clarity, allow me to mark on the map. Here is the location where objects would have fallen. Yes. Directly opposite the scene of the crime on the other side of the rather wide road. Would it have been so hard for somebody to mention this top-hinged casement thing before? Oh, I have another question for you, Constable. And what would that be, Sa? How do you even know? Why would you have any idea what sort of windows Mr. and Mrs. Garrideb's house is furnished with? Oh, well, Sa, that's very simple. You see, I helped with the investigation yesterday. You have some thoughts on this, lady.
Excuse me.
Do you have something to add, Mrs. Beat? Sorry? You look, well, delighted. Is there some particular reason for that? Oh, I was just remembering, that's all. We really were so lucky. Lucky? What do you mean? Well, of course I feel terrible for the poor woman who was attacked. Don't misunderstand me, please. But we were just so lucky it didn't happen on Rolly's beat. It was so close, you see. Oh, I hadn't realized. Oh yes, that street, Briar Road, that's the boundary between Rolly's beat and the next one. New plan! This is a corrupt cop who moved the body so he wouldn't have to do the paperwork. Constable Beat. Oh, yes, that's right. That's the reason I was helping out with interviewing the occupants of the Garrideb household yesterday. Their house is on my beat, you see, Sa. That really was cutting it close then. Constable, I wonder if you could clarify something. If the Garrideb household is on your beat, does that mean that the pavement next to it is as well? Outside Mr. Garrideb's house? Yes, ma'am. The pavement on that side of the road is part of my beat. I see. I was unaware of that. Just think, if the woman had been attacked just on the other side of Briar Road, we would never have been able to go for that meal to celebrate our wedding anniversary. But that's the life of a Bobby, after all. Extraordinary people are Bobbies, tirelessly working. for the benefit of all Londoners. Do you know what I think? I think it was the good Lord's way of rewarding my Rolly for all his hard work. Don't you think so, my darling? That must be it, Pat, my love. That must be it. Perhaps we should make sure we have that information officially on record. Leave it to me, Mr. Naruhodo. I'll take care of it immediately. Case files information has been updated in the court record. Now it's my turn, I think. But according to my notes here, the sun had gone down already and it was dark. Oh, but Rolly and I were strolling along gazing at the night sky and looking for our lucky star. Sorry? The star that will guide us to eternal happiness. Can't it guide you to the answer to the question? If a flaming book had cut across the sky in front of us, it would have lit up like a shooting star. And if I'd seen a shooting star, I would have made a wish upon it. Let Rolly be an inspector, I would have said, 3 times at least. Of course, what with the smog and everything, we couldn't actually see any stars. In short, are you trying to say that neither a book nor a knife crossed the sky before you? Yes, that is correct, Sa. As sure as the night sky in London is starless, Sa. It certainly seems like they're telling the truth. Then we saw the poor woman fall to the ground, so we ran straight over to help her. I did leave the scene to go and fetch help, but my trusty Rolly was there to make sure nothing was disturbed. Yes, you said that you went up to a nearby police box to fetch another officer, is that right? That's right, yes. If it had been on Rolly's beat, I would have known exactly where I was going, of course. Don't feel bad, my love. You can't be expected to know the location of every police box on every beat. So Rolly told me the way, only I sort of got a little lost on the way. Patricia, my darling, that's why I love you. Your terrible sense of direction is bewitching to me. Oh, Pat. Oh, Rolly. Oh, please. So I suppose I was gone for about 15 minutes. Well, like I said, my Rolly was at the scene the whole time, making sure nothing was disturbed. I was off duty at the time, of course, but a true Bobby is never really off duty, Sa. I didn't take my eye off the crime scene for 1 moment, Sa. Nothing strange to report on that front, Sa. Nothing to report? That's correct, Sa. I had my eyes wide open the entire time, never looked away for a second. No one else approached the scene, and nothing was removed from it. I can swear to that on the yard's honor, Sa. Really, that seems a little strange. Beg your pardon, Sa? Strange, Sa? Seems altogether regular to me. This burnt copy of The Lion's Pride was originally in the Garrett household. The question remains, how did it find its way into the hand of the victim? Can you shed any light, seeing as you were at the scene of the crime the entire time? Aha! Could it be a different copy, Sa? One that just happened to be burnt as well? Even if that were possible, why would the victim have been gripping a book like that in her hand? You can see from this photographic print, she had a bag over her shoulder. Well, Sa, that book was in the lady's hands from the moment we arrived at the scene. Is that so? There's something about this statement that's not sitting right with me. 2 mysteries of how that knife ended up in her back, how that book ended up in her hand. There must be some common thread between them. I'm so sorry, Mr. Naruhodo. I had no right to speak out. What do you mean? I requested the cross-examination of Mrs. Garrett without consulting you, even if the judge did deny me. Oh, I see. Well, I agree with you. We do need testimony from Mrs. Garrett if we're ever going to get the truth of this matter. Do you really think so? Well, think about it. No matter how far it is across the road or how the window opens, Mr. Garrett's book found its way to the scene of the crime somehow, didn't it? You're right. And then there was Mrs. Garrett's reaction to me showing her the knife. The woman's hiding something, I'm sure of it. We need to use this cross-examination to uncover more clues. We'll get to the bottom of this one way or another, I swear.
Hold it!
Let's try pressing on this. A very good question, sir, and the answer is this. Is the noble founding principles of the force written on it as a reminder to all us policemen of our sworn duty. Showed us that before, didn't he? Did he? I can't say I remember. He did. To patrol the streets of London town and uphold the peace of the common man. It's what the job's all about. And that's why I can stand here today beside my long-suffering wife and tell you a Bobby's good for his word. While rubbing my tired eyes, admittedly saw. Oh, Rolly, you're so manly. Of course I am, my darling Patricia. Oh, Pat. Oh, Rolly. No, none of this is what I meant. I meant, how can you say for certain that this case has nothing to do with Mr. and Mrs. Garrett? Ah, I see, Sa. You should have said so earlier, Sa. Yes, well, so could you answer the question? It's a waste of time, then. Absolutely, Sa. I will answer it to the fullest of my abilities, Sa. There's a surprising reason why Mr. and Mrs. Garrett's domestic dispute can't be related to this case. But before I get into that, Sa, just one thing. Yes? Very much like you and all your countrymen to understand the great British institution of Scotland Yard. So I hope you'll take back some tales of us London bobbies and how we uphold our guiding principles. I wasn't planning on going back just yet. I've only just arrived here. So to that end, Sa, I'd be happy to lend you my warrant card for your perusal. I must warn you, you won't be able to get through it without shedding a few tears. Thank you, I'll try. We have his warrant card now. Can I ask you something, please, Mr. Lawyer, sir? So I guess we're done cross-examining. Principles of policing. A policeman will strive to preserve the peace within his allotted beat. Patrolling officer is expected to walk 20 miles around his beat every day for the furtherance of community relations. Any crimes fall under the jurisdiction of the beat in which they are discovered. And when a crime is discovered on his beat, a policeman must assist with initial investigations and help detectives. Can I ask you something, please, Mr. Lawyer, sir? Oh, yes, of course. What is it? You're doubting us, aren't you? I can tell. What? I wasn't really, I mean, what's she doing? Please, just because I'm a woman doesn't make my testimony any less valuable. You might just see me as the wife of a policeman, but I'm a woman of my word, I am. I really don't remember ever suggesting that I doubted you. No excuses, I don't want to hear it. My voice will be heard. My lord, you'll let me speak, won't you? Yes, Mrs. Beat, I will allow you to supplement your testimony if you so desire. Sometimes the path of least resistance is the sage one. There's a very loud mutter. I heard that! That Japanese man thinks a policeman's wife's word counts for nothing, does he? We've never said that, but... Oh, watch out, sir. I might let you get away with something like that, but my Rolly won't. Duly noted, Mrs. Beat. Please, I humbly ask you to continue. What could she possibly be about to say, I wonder? I know what I saw. My eyes never let me down. My sense of direction is a little off sometimes, though.
Hold it!
Mrs. Beat, nobody is questioning what you've told us. I saw it, I did. That evening I saw it clearly. That little Eastern man with the whiskers and the funny curved back slinking away from the scene. Ha. And now what I didn't see as well. I didn't see any flaming books or knives flying through the sky. All very clear. You also mentioned something about having a poor sense of direction. Oh yes, well, that's a little embarrassing really. I'm always ending up at the wrong place when I've made arrangements to meet Rolly. He gets ever so cross.
Excuse me.
What's up with you, Rolly? Constable Beat, is there a problem? No sir, no problem sir. Did your wife's remark just now bring something to mind, perhaps? Oh, well, in a way, sir, yes sir. I was just remembering that the same thing happened that evening is all. You mean Mrs. Beat lost her way on the night of the incident? Well, you see, I sent her off to find a police box in the next beat over from mine. She was gone a fair bit longer than what I was expecting. Thought she'd be back inside 10 minutes, but my darling was gone a good 15. Oh, Rolly, you're such a tease, but the reason I was so long was because of the bouquet, silly. The bouquet? Sorry, what bouquet are you talking about? Oh, it was a present for our wedding anniversary. Rolly's so romantic. He saved up for it with farthings and pennies he found in the gutter while doing his rounds. So they don't pay him enough to buy you flowers? Jeez. Yes, how romantic. I'd forgotten all about it until just now. Had you, my darling? Sorry, my throat is like really dry. Oh yes. But then that was just between us. No talking about it to anyone else, darling. You have to promise. Really? Oh. What was that all about? Constable Beat looked very obviously troubled during that exchange. Afraid I can't offer any useful insight, Mr. Naruhodo. But I'm quite sure of one thing. We have to ask Mrs. Beat about the bouquet. Mrs. Beat, this bouquet you just mentioned, I'd like you to add details about it to your testimony, please. Oh, really? Yes, I'd love to. What happened was I dropped my bouquet and ended up losing my way for a while.
Hold it!
You mean you dropped the bouquet at the scene of the crime? Yes, that's right. Oh, I was so upset. When we ran over and saw it was a woman with a knife in her back, I was so shocked I dropped the bouquet Rolly gave me. It was in a dark spot where the streetlights weren't casting any light, so I didn't notice it first. And then you went to the police box to report it to the policeman whose beat it was on. Yes, and I came back to the scene together with the other constable, you see. Then I spotted my bouquet again, but the funny thing was, when I went over to pick it up, it was nowhere near the victim's body at all. In case you need reminding, Mrs. Beat, the victim is not deceased. I was all flustered for a moment before I heard a voice calling me from the other side of the road. Your husband, presumably? He moved the body because he's lazy. Or corrupt, or both. That's right, silly me, I'd gone over to the wrong side of the street. Although, I'm going to blame the bouquet this time. I can't think how it got there. I really can't. So the bouquet somehow moved from one side of Briar Road to the opposite. Curious indeed, isn't it? But the worst of it is, I forgot to pick the bouquet up again when we left the scene. That beautiful rose Rolly bought me. That change from the gutter he spent so long collecting. By bouquet, do you perhaps mean this sorry solitary rose? Oh, yes, that's it. That's the bouquet Ruli bought me for our anniversary with old bits of change he found in the gutter. Maybe just call it a rose? Tell us, Lord Van Zeeks, where did you come by the flower? According to the report by the police officer in charge of the crime scene investigation, it was found on the edge of the pavement in front of the Garadeb household. In front of the Garadeb's house. Although it wasn't noticed until the morning as it lay where the street lamps cast no light. It was believed to be of no relevance to the case since it was found on the opposite side of the thoroughfare. Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you. Could I have it back now, please? No, I think for good measure this rose should be added to the court record as evidence. Oh. But it's a symbol of our love. Let's investigate the rose. Very stylish paper the flower's wrapped in, isn't it? It's just an old newspaper, Mr. Naruhodo. Oh, I suppose it's because I'm not used to seeing English print, it looks so exotic to me. Ah, I see. Is something wrong? Oh, no. I was just thinking that if you wrap the stone-baked sweet potato in English newspaper, it might look like some sort of fancy cake. Ah, Susato-san, you do love your cakes. An English rose. It's such a beautiful flower. Ah, this is a rose, is it? I've never seen one before. Do you not take an interest in flowers, Mr. Naruhodo? I wouldn't say that exactly, but I do know 3 types at least. Gosh, 3? Yes, plum blossom, peach blossom, and cherry blossom. I think those are all just one type of flower, but like, or I guess they're different types technically. Perhaps you should consider branching out, learn some that aren't fruit tree based, for example. Don't roses normally have thorns? Did they just not? Okay, this is the same thing. Okay. There's nothing we're going to learn by looking at the flower. It's probably just... But it's a symbol of our love. I want it back after the trial, do you hear me? I want it back. Good grief, rest assured that I shall do my very best not to forget, Mrs. Beat. I didn't take my eye off the crime scene for 1 second, sir. Nothing strange to report on that front, sir. What do I make of all this? Yes, the whole idea of an invisible attacker has been troubling me all along. But I believe I'm starting to get a picture of what really happened here now. Forthfoot had no business being at the scene of the crime. It made me sure that Mrs. Garadeb was hiding something from us, but it's becoming increasingly clear that someone else has been hiding something from us as well. I think I may already be armed with everything I need to strike a decisive blow here this time. I'm going to expose the whole truth. It's going to expose the whole truth about this mysterious affair. I'm going to save just in case. But I think what we do here is we present the rose and say, like, nothing strange to report, like your wife's bouquet moving from one side of the road to the other?
Objection.
You claim, Constable Beat, that there was nothing to report in the 15 or so minutes you were guarding the scene, but that cannot be. What do you mean to say? In your testimony just now, Mrs. Beat, you explained to the court that when you arrived back at the scene of the crime with the policeman assigned to the beat, the bouquet you had dropped at the victim's side was no longer anywhere nearby. Yes, on the opposite side of Briar Road to where the victim was attacked. Considering the size of the meager bouquet, if a single sorry bloom can be so described, no doubt it was blown in the wind across the street back into the gutter where it belongs. Meager. But if that were the case, why did Constable Beat not testify to the fact? No one else approached the scene and nothing was removed from it. Constable Beat swore to that on Scotland Yard's honor. But the bouquet belonged to me. It has nothing to do with the case. That's why Rolly didn't mention it, I'm sure. No, because sadly it's not only your bouquet we're talking about here. More than one thing in this case is mysteriously the wrong way around. What are you talking about? Think about it. Besides Mrs. Beat's bouquet, there's Mr. Garrideb's book. Mr. Garrideb's copy of The Lion's Pride, which was thrown out the window by his wife, would have struck the pane of the casement window and landed here on the west side of the street, and yet it was actually found here on the opposite side of the road in the victim's hand. Meanwhile, according to the testimony we've heard, Mrs. Beat's bouquet should have been dropped here at the scene of the crime on the east side of the street, but in fact, it was actually found here on the opposite side of the road in front of Mr. and Mrs. Garrideb's house. There's no logical explanation for those things, unless somebody deliberately moved them. What are you trying to say? The way you're talking, it sounds like you think my Rolly's done something wrong. I mean, yeah. Don't you listen to a word that scrawny lawyer says. Wittering on about books and bouquets, why should we care? It's nitpicking, that's what it is. Oh good, Mrs. Garrideb's come round. You might call it nitpicking, Mrs. Garrideb. But deliberately meddling with the scene of a crime is a criminal offense. It's called, tampering, Mr. Naruhodo. But the person responsible for this tampering cannot admit to it, for a very subtle but compelling reason. Tampering? You've barely heard the term before. Tell us, my learned friend, who would possibly have had cause to carry out such an elaborate deception? If there is someone who tampered with the scene of the crime that evening, all the evidence and all the testimony points to that one particular person. Counsel, I must demand that you substantiate this conjecture. Who are you saying is responsible for tampering with the scene of the crime? Rolly Beat. Obviously, there's only one person it could have been. Constable Rolly Beat, it was you. What, a policeman? A member of Scotland Yard? What nonsense, why would my Rolly do something like that? There's no one straighter than my husband. No Bobby works more tirelessly for the people of London. Mrs. Beat, you said in your testimony that your husband asked you to go to a nearby police box to fetch the officer on duty. The 15 minutes that you were absent from the scene is the only opportunity anyone had to tamper with it. You're making it up. It's all nonsense. It's all lies. What about that Japanese man with the whiskers? I bet it was him. He did it. If that was true, Constable Beat would have seen him do it. Oh. And forgive me for pointing it out, but when you dropped your bouquet, Mrs. Beat, it was after the defendant had fled the scene. Ah, well, well. First you make accusations about the landlord and his wife, and now you incriminate a policeman as well. Such noble and honest professions as landlords and policemen, surely not known for lying. But your accusations lack one very important thing. You claim the crime scene was tampered with, There is only one reason anyone would commit such a reckless crime, to hide something. That's right, he's right. But my husband and I just happened to be there, that's all. Why would we have anything to hide? It doesn't make sense. You offered no motive for this alleged tampering, and until you do, your accusations are nothing but empty threats. Constable Beat had a very good reason for wanting to tamper with the scene of the crime. That's the key to this entire affair. Mr. Naruhodo, have you managed to solve this mystery? Counsel, you have made a very serious accusation against a London police officer. If you are mistaken, I am sure I need not point out that your reputation as a lawyer will be irrevocably damaged. With that stark warning in mind, you will now explain to the court the motive for this alleged tampering. Yes, my lord. Constable Beat's motive for tampering with the crime scene was to hide where the victim fell. Where the victim fell to the ground. That is what this Bobby had to cover up at all costs. What? Where the victim fell? You mean where she was attacked? What are you talking about? We told you at the very start, didn't we? On the pavement of Briar Road, we saw it happen, remember? It was right here, as if anyone didn't already know. That's certainly what everybody has been led to believe. But in fact, that isn't where the victim was stabbed at all. What? What? I'm beginning to wonder where this tumultuous trial will end, Counsel. If that's your assertion, then the court is dying to know, my Nipponese friend. Where are you proposing that the crime actually took place that evening? Well, it would be right here. But that's on the opposite side of the road? I don't understand. On the evening in question, Mr. Garadeb's book fell directly down from the open window above, and your bouquet, Mrs. Beat, never moved at all. What did move was the scene of the crime itself. Good gracious!
Objection!
Perhaps you haven't been listening to the ample testimony the court has heard. But these witnesses both saw the moment the attack took place. That's right, I saw it with my own eyes. It was 5 o'clock in the evening and already dark. This was the typical London fog on the ground. When you saw the incident unfold and ran to the victim's aid, that was actually on the west side of Briar Road. No, that's not true. It can't have been. Constable Beat then arranged for you to be absent for a while by sending you for help, and during the 15 minutes you were away, he transplanted the crime scene. He moved all the things shown in this print, the victim herself, the 4 books. He moved everything, in fact, to the pavement on the east side of Briar Road. Extraordinary, but the constable overlooked one thing. What did he overlook? The bouquet, I presume. Exactly. The prosecution told the court just a few minutes ago about the discovery of the rose bouquet. What Benzig said it wasn't noticed until the morning. Oh, excuse me. It wasn't noticed until the morning as it lay where the street lamps cast no light. Yes, it couldn't be seen in the dark, obviously. Which is why it was only the bouquet that was found in its original position on the pavement on the west side of Briar Road. And that is the defense's theory about what really happened that evening. How do you respond, Constable Rolly Beat? Well, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to nod off again, but I haven't slept properly in a month. Did I miss anything important? Oh, Rolly. It isn't true, is it? What the lawyer said is all lies, isn't it? I know it is because you're the most upstanding, righteous man I know. I had a dream, a terrible dream. All the things I did that night, everything come out, everything exposed. Only it seems it wasn't a dream at all. Good golly! Order, order, order! What on earth is the meaning of all of this? Oh, Rolly, why would you do something like this? Moving a corpse is a criminal offense, isn't it? Wishing the victim dead should be one, too. Constable, explain yourself. Why would you do this? As a respected member of Scotland Yard, your duty is to protect the good people of London Town. I can't say, sir. What? I really am ever so sorry about all of this. We're damaging the Yard's reputation for everything. I have a possible explanation for why, on that particular evening, Constable Beat felt compelled to move the scene of the crime. I can think of one reason. How can you possibly know? You, a foreigner, presuming to understand the mind of a Scotland Yard policeman. And yet, Lord Van Zeeks, it is this foreigner who has uncovered the startling truth of the matter thus far. I believe it would be beneficial to the court to hear this extraordinary young lawyer's theory. Counsel for the defense, if you please. Yes, my lord. Now then, I think you had better show us some evidence. At once, my lord. England, Japan, it makes no difference where you come from, human emotions are the same. I think I have a fairly good idea of the feeling behind this man's actions. What gives away the motive for Constable Beat's unthinkable actions. Is it this? Do we present the case file? The victim remains unconscious. I'm gonna go ahead and do a save here, just so we can, like, hold some of our, whatchamacallit, thingies. Let's try the warrant card. I realize that I am a foreigner in this land and I have only just arrived from Japan, which is why all of this information about London so-called bobbies is completely new to me. I have learnt that, though honorable, patrolling the beat is the most demanding work in the world, for example. Keeping the peace, looking after the citizens on his beat in all kinds of ways. There's no doubt that the young bobby is charged with a great deal to do each day, certainly. But for Constable Beat, the day in question was special. Special? How? On account of this bouquet, my lord. Oh, yes. It was our very first wedding anniversary. Constable Beat had worked so hard to be able to afford this simple gift for his wife, and was so looking forward to taking her out for a celebratory meal, when he and Mrs. Beat stumbled upon a crime along Briar Road. When he saw that shadowy figure through the fog collapse on the pavement ahead of them, what must have gone through the man's mind? But, just on that one particular day, I was looking forward to celebrating my wedding anniversary. Mrs. Beat puts up with a lot being married to a bobby like me. I wanted to show my dear wife how much I care. This is the warrant card that Constable Beat offered to lend me earlier. Inside, among the rules for patrolling policemen, it says, When a crime is discovered on his beat, a policeman must assist with initial investigations and help detectives. Aha, Constable Beat. Is that or is that not the reason why you moved the whole scene of the crime that day? Yes. Everything you said, it's alright. So that's it. It was all to do with the boundary of your beat. Oh, exactly. To summarize, the incident actually occurred on Constable Beat's beat. Good gracious, Constable, do you realize the gravity of what you have done? It was the first time since I became a copper that I'd ever cursed God. Stay close to me, Pat. The criminal could still be lurking somewhere. As we ran over to the scene, I had every intention of doing my duty as a police officer. We got to report this to the station as quickly as possible. But then it dawned on me. I realized where we were, where the victim was lying, and what that meant for me. When a crime is discovered on his beat, a policeman must assist with initial investigations and help detectives. Why here? Why did this have to happen here? And why tonight of all nights? Why? It's a copper's job to guard the scene of the crime, so I told Pat she'd have to go to the nearest police box and fetch whoever was on duty there. It was then when I opened my mouth to speak. It just came out. I couldn't believe the words that were coming out of my own mouth. This is the next beat to mine, Pat, so you'll have to go to the police box that covers it. Turn right along Meerschaum Street and then... I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh, Constable. I just wanted, just that one night to take my Patricia out for dinner. Oh, Rolly. Just that one night. You knew that if the incident was on your beat, your evening of celebration would be ruined. So you decided to move the entire crime scene outside your jurisdiction, just across the street to the east pavement of Briar Road, which falls under the neighboring beat's care. You see, I thought... Well, I was sure the victim was dead, you see. I beg your pardon? Oh, of course he did. Otherwise, my Rolly would never have left the poor woman on the freezing cold pavement. Ah, I see your meaning now. But God got me back for my sins, didn't he? That's why. That's why I missed the rose I bought for Pat. Oh no, Rolly, that was all my fault. I should never have dropped it in such a dark place. Or, you know, you shouldn't mess with a murder scene. I'm so sorry, Rolly. Can you tell us, Constable, how many books did you move from the one side of the road to the other in total? Oh, 4 it was, yes, definitely 4. 3 of them dropped by Mr. Natsume, and the 4th being the one that fell from the window upstairs in the Karadeb household, of course. But what made you place that book in the victim's hand when all the others were scattered haphazardly around, I mean? Oh, well, sir, that's because that's how I found it. How you found it? What do you mean? When we first ran over to the scene, the victim was already holding the book. So, when I moved everything, I made sure it was still in her hand. You're sure it was this book, The Lion's Pride, that the victim was holding? Oh, yes, no doubt about it, sir. Interesting. I thought it was an open and shut case at the time, you see. There were only the two people at the scene. Pat and me both saw it happen. However which way you looked at it, it had to be the fellow who ran off who'd done it, I thought. Couldn't see the harm, really. I didn't think that moving it all over the road would make a jot of difference. I suppose this is it for me now. I've had it. My lord. Yes, Lord Van Zieks? I believe that concludes the cross-examination of the witnesses. Constable, you may withdraw. Yes, Mr. Prosecutor, sir, what will become of my Rolly? What will happen to him? For now, you are free to go home. The police will contact you in due course. Please don't punish my husband. This was all my fault. It's because I'm always moaning at him for coming home late. Leave it now, Pat. Let's go home. I'm tired. All right then, my love. One last thing, Constable. Sa? Let this be a lesson to you. In a criminal investigation, every detail matters, however insignificant it may seem to you. Yes, carve that lesson in your mind. And never again make the mistake of tampering with the scene of a crime. Ah, never again, Sa. You mean to say... Leave now. This trial is not yet over. Sa! I mean, I don't think he should keep his job after that. He almost got an innocent man convicted of attempted murder. Well, quite a startling revelation, I must say. Whoever thought of a third party transplanting the entire scene of a crime like that? Indeed, my lord. Nevertheless, there are some immutable facts here, principally that the accused, Mr. Soseki Natsume, is the only person who possibly could have committed this crime, even though we just established that that's not the case anymore.
Objection.
No, I disagree. Now that we know the true scene of the incident, there is someone else. Another person who could be responsible for the knife in the victim's back. Forgive me for being presumptuous. I believe the prosecution is probably well aware of this possibility already. Lord Van Zieks, is this true? Very well. Name the person if you will, and if further investigation is warranted. The prosecution has no objection to the trial continuing. We will name this other person who could have perpetrated the crime. I mean Joan Garadeb. The defense would once again like to request the cross-examination of a new witness, my lord. Once again, my assistant made the same request earlier. In order to finally reveal the truth about this case, it's imperative that we cross-examine juror number 4, Mrs. Joan Garadeb. Me, oh dearie me. That request has already been denied. But the situation is very different now. Mrs. Garadeb, answer me this. What do you want now, you little toad? At the time of the incident, you were engaged in a violent argument with your husband, Mr. John Garadeb. In the course of the argument, a minor house fire was ignited, and to clear the smoke from the room, your husband opened a window that looked out over Briar Road. Well, what of it? You threw this book at your husband when he was cornered with his back against the window. Upon striking the pane of the open top-hinged casement window, the book plummeted directly down, finding its way to what we now know to be the true scene of the incident. Yes, and as I said, what of it? During the argument, you were beside yourself with rage, as such you threw not just books, but anything you could lay your hands on. So, let me ask you one more time, Mrs. Garadeb. This knife, the one removed from the victim's back, have you really never laid eyes on it before? Ah. I don't recall it. Seriously? Am I supposed to remember everything I picked up and threw at my husband? And anyway, the man over there in all that regalia said members of the jury needn't testify, didn't he? Conveniently, yes. No, I have no recollection of saying that at all, juror number 4. Oh? Make no mistake, you jurors are not special in any way. You are not immune to the judicial process. If you know something about this knife, madame, let the truth come out. But that's just a common or garden knife. It could have come from anywhere. There's several like that at home. If one went missing, how would you even expect me to know? What's that? Are you joking? What are you saying? Please, Mrs. Garrideb. Now you listen to me. I refuse to believe all this nonsense. I couldn't bear the thought that I'd injure someone. Do you hear? I couldn't bear it. Oh, the poor woman. So yes, I want evidence. I want to see hard evidence if you're going to insist on this being my fault. You're going to have to prove to me that I threw that knife, if that's what you think. Come along now, chop chop, do your worst. Well, Mr. Naruhodo? If I had evidence like that, believe me, I would have thrown it at her already. And take the stand, juror. Oh? Prosecution does not object to the defense's request to cross-examine this woman. Thank you, Lord Van Zieks. I'm going to have to testify. Juror number 4, as I'm sure you will appreciate, having observed it with your own eyes today, witness testimony can lead to the most extraordinary truths being unearthed, truths of which the witnesses themselves may not have even been aware. Oh, dearie me. So I demand your full and unadulterated testimony, Mrs. Garrideb, and mark my words, in this court of law today, we shall extract the truth. Do you concur, counsels? Certainly, my lord. Oh, that's what I'm hoping for, my lord. This is getting interesting. This is such a strange feeling. For the first time since arriving in this country, it actually feels real. I'm here in the Old Bailey, and I'm a lawyer. Witness, state your name and occupation. Oh, yes, my name is Joan Garrideb, and I'm, well, I'm a juror and such like. Sounds like even she doesn't know if she's a housewife or a maid or what anymore. The court has decided your testimony is required in order to clarify matters in this case. Do you understand, madam? Yes, my lord. You will tell the court everything that took place in your household on the evening in question. I warn you, do not attempt to hide the truth. Oh, dearie me. Chin up, Joni. Nothing to worry about now. Oh, I didn't know you were here, John. Wasn't only you in the room that day, old thing, was it? Rather, I thought I ought to testify as well, don't you? But what about your knee, dear? Don't you worry about that. Hardly notice it. I'm not the sort of chap to leave a comrade to face disciplinary action alone. Oh, John. I presume you are Mr. John Garrideb? Yes, sir. Former 2nd Lieutenant of the 3rd Regiment of the 4th Northumberland Fusiliers, sir. Where did her teapot go? Oh, I see, it is on the thing still. Seen my fair share of action and now living the quiet life, as it were. The quiet life? Were you not engaged in an incendiary battle with your spouse on the day in question? Ah, well, yes, quite. I believe this may represent a first in the proud history of the British court. Calling a juror to the witness stand is unprecedented. Probably because I'm pretty sure even at the time there would have been some kind of legal doctrine about, like, people connected to cases can't be jurors. I am going to get another beer from the fridge. I just stubbed my toe on my chair. Like, these things are nice because they, like, protect your hands but keep the can cold. Pardon the loud noise. I just saw my audio thing spike when I opened that. You will recount clearly and concisely the events in your home at the time of the incident in question. Sir, at once. The Battle of Garrideb. Yes, on the day you're referring to, the wife and I did have a bit of a skirmish. Can't recall the reason now. Knocked a candlestick over and set fire to the carpet. Soon had it out, though, and got the window open. Meanwhile, I was picking up whatever I could find to throw at him. Plenty of knives around our place. Can't say I'd notice if one or two went missing, I'm afraid. If that Bally thing in the victim's back really was one of ours, you'll have a job proving it, I think. Sounds as though it was quite the battlefield in your household that evening. Although an entirely one-sided assault, it seems. The enemy caught us on the hop, sir. Had no choice but to dig in and take defensive measures. To be honest, if the enemy had kept shelling us for another minute, we'd have been toast. Of course, a veteran such as myself is only too aware that on every battlefield you're just a gnat's whisker from death at any moment. Are we still talking about a marital quarrel here? Well, I must say I'm dubious that this testimony will shed any light on the origins of this jackknife. In combat, one's focus narrows such that surroundings are barely noticed. These witnesses may not be able to offer anything more than they have testified already. This may be a dead end. Banziks may well be right. Well, whatever the chances, we only have this last cross-examination to uncover the truth, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes, I'm afraid so. Very well, counsel. Begin your cross-examination. On the day you're referring to, the wife and I did have a bit of a skirmish. Can't recall the reason now. The reason is what you told us yesterday, I believe. Yes, that's right. If I remember correctly, it all started because of a note that was tucked into the pages of a book belonging to Mr. Garrideb. A rather passionate note, in fact, but Mrs. Garrideb found the note, discovering her husband's little secret. She gave him a mighty number of slaps across the face for it, too. What a sordid state of affairs. Hell on earth. I say, when a chap says he can't recall such things, it's common decency not to drag it all up. And besides, half of it was wide of the mark anyway. A likely story. These waters run very deep. And what transpired next after these multiple blows to the face? Knocked a candlestick over and set fire to the carpet. Soon had it out, though, and got the window open. And the fire also spread to some items of furniture, did it? The bookcase, my armchair, anything of mine, really. Just so happens there was some bathwater around that evening, so I sloshed that about to put it out. A most precarious situation you put yourself in. Ours is a 3-story townhouse on the west side of the street where the water main isn't connected yet. Have to draw water from a public water pump during the day if you need any, you see. The lodgers are always moaning that they can't get any water at night. Although that little mustached Japanese man buys water in bottles, I believe. The defendant, Mr. Natsume, you mean? Yes, he receives a stipend for his studies, you know, from his home country. Can you imagine being able to brew a pot of tea at all hours? He's obviously very well off. Have you actually seen the state of the man? I believe he uses all of his income to buy books. Anyway, the point is, I was able to douse the fire with water, fortunately enough. Meanwhile, I was picking up whatever I could find to throw at him. Even though the room was on fire. As far as I was concerned at the time, it was more important to extinguish my anger than the flames. When a woman wants to throw, she must throw. That is most certainly not true of a Susato takedown, Mr. Naruhodo. How did she know I was thinking about that? So please, cast your mind back and try to remember. Was a knife among the items you threw at your husband that day? In all honesty, I don't recall. But I feel I must point out that I am no monster. Let me see. Some bread, a cabbage, garlic, a towel, and a sponge, a napkin.
Excuse me.
Do you have something to add, sir? Mr. Garadeb. Huh? Ed, don't shoot! Ah, sorry, I beg your pardon. Did your wife's remarks just now bring something to mind? Nothing of any significance, no. Just that the barrage of projectiles the old thing launched in my direction was somewhat more solid than she implies. Books, bricks, and the fire poker, I seem to recall. Ouch. And the woman's aim is uncanny. She managed a direct hit with every bally. Ah! Good grief, woman, we're not at home now. This is a court of law. Oh, dearie me, ever so sorry, dear. What's she even doing with a teapot in here? And how does she not run out of tea? Honestly, John, I would never have thrown such things at you, obviously. Well, take a look at this then. How do you suppose that happened, Your pipe, sir. I had this thing in my hand as usual at the time of the onslaught. Knocked it clean out with one of her soft projectiles she did, yes. When I went to pick the thing up, it was broken in two. I'd like to see a sponge do that sort of damage. You see, your pipe was broken. It would never have been sent flying unless it was hit by something pretty solid. Anyway, I've managed to bandage the thing up for now. You are one to exaggerate, aren't you, dear? It could be important. The defense believes Mr. Garadeb's remarks just now to be of great significance. Some war veterans' words only tell us one thing: betray a fiery woman, and pipes as well as hearts may be broken. Sentimental wisdom, perhaps, but hardly worthy of adding to the formal testimony. Indeed, common sense, one might say. Might one? In that case, would you at least permit us to examine the pipe, sir? Well, I don't see why not. Oh, dearie me, there you go again, trying to ingratiate yourself with a young lady. Very well, the court will accept the gentleman's pipe as evidence. I hope I didn't speak out of turn, Mr. Naruhodo. I was just feeling rather disappointed for you that your request was turned down. I mean, examining the pipe is pretty good. There's a small nick out of the bowl here. Look, it appears to have been made relatively recently. You can see how there are little scrapes and dents all over it. It's clearly a well-loved pipe. Yes, you're right. It seems to me recently that being well loved goes hand in hand with getting some battle scars. This particular nick is catching my eye though, because it's clearly new. Oh! There is the blade of a knife in here. Oh, something just twinkled inside the chamber of the pipe there. Yeah, I saw it. Something stuck in there, I think. Let's turn it over and give it a shake. What's this? It's a tiny fragment of metal. It looks like the tip of a blade or something. The tip of a blade? Surely it couldn't be. I mean, I'll check out the bandage thing, but I think... It must have considerable sentimental value to Mr. Garrideb, given that he's gone to the trouble of repairing it like this. Either that or he can't afford to replace it. This is the tiny piece of metal we found in the chamber of Mr. Garrideb's pipe. It looks like the tip of a blade or something. Tip of a blade? Is something wrong, Mr. Naruhodo? I don't really know. There's just something niggling me. I can't quite put my finger on what it is. Perhaps it's that case. We want us to examine some of the other pieces of evidence again. Let's examine the knife again. I don't know if we need to know that it's the... Like, we know it's the tip of this knife, but, like, does the game need to know that I know that, basically? Well, look here, Mr. Naruhodo, just at the tip. A small piece of the blade appears to be missing. Part of it's missing, or could be wrong, but I've just got a feeling. You remember this? Ah, that's the tiny fragment of metal that we found inside Mr. Garrideb's pipe. Yeah, and just maybe... Oh my, it's a perfect fit. Somehow I just knew it. Okay. Oh no, it's fine. Thanks to Susato-san, we have some new evidence to work with. We should examine it carefully. Well, thank you for that rebuttal, Mr. Garrideb. Return to the crux of the matter. What can you tell the court about the knife you used to attack the victim? I guess let's present the tip of the knife. Mr. Garrideb, could I ask you to take a good look at this, please? You can ask, but I can't see a bally thing. You can't. Used to call me Dead-Eye Deb back in the regiment, of course. That was some time ago now. Even when I'm trying to enjoy a large print book by the fire these days, I struggle to tell a B from a D and a P from a Q, to be honest. Oh, he does. Dearie me, it's rather wearing being asked about every other letter and every other word. You must be very dizzy. Dussy. What is that? A tiny scrap of metal? Yes, almost certainly from the tip of a blade. And what may appear at first to be just a tiny scrap is in fact a crucial piece of evidence. Interesting. And where did the defense come by this evidence? It was lodged in the chamber of Mr. Garrideb's pipe. My pipe, you say? By Jove, I wonder how that got there. And what precisely does this fragment of metal signify, Counsel? Are you suggesting that it is in some way related to the matter of the stabbing on Briar Road? I am. What? When put together with another piece of evidence already in the court record, I believe this tiny fragment of metal will unravel the whole truth of the case, my lord. You appear rather confident in that rather extraordinary statement, Counsel. Very well then, present the pertinent evidence to the court. What evidence, when paired with this fragment of metal, allegedly reveals the truth of this entire case?
Take that!
The jackknife. This is the knife that was found in the victim's back. If you look closely, you will see that there is a small piece at the tip of the blade that is missing. A common issue with the inferior blades sold at unsavory street markets. Criminals who use them regularly leave the tips lodged in their victims' bones. And what of this particular knife? No doubt its tip has suffered a similar fate, now languishing somewhere near the spine of the victim. No, that's not the case. The tip of this particular knife's blade is the very fragment of metal we discovered in the chamber of Mr. Garrideb's pipe. Ugh! Good grief, Lord Van Zieks. I don't believe it. The knife from the crime scene and this fragment of metal are a perfect match. Good golly gosh! Gee willikers! Order, order, order! Is this some sort of Eastern sorcery? They just gotta be racist. They cannot... we cannot do anything right in this trial without them being racist towards the Japanese. This is no magic, my lord. This is a miracle. A miracle? So Van Zieks has figured it out, has he? Counsel, explain this extraordinary circumstance at once. Yes, my lord. Crucial point we have to ask ourselves here is when did the fragment of metal find its way inside Mr. Garrideb's pipe? Something that was clarified for us in the most recent witness testimony. Had this thing in my hand as usual at the time of the onslaught. Knocked it clean out with one of her soft projectiles, she did, yes? It would never have been sent flying unless it was hit by something pretty solid. Oh, dearie me. During the argument between these two that occurred just as the victim was on the pavement below, Mrs. Garrideb flung this knife at her husband. However, the knife missed Mr. Garrideb, instead striking the pipe in his hand at the time, which caused the tip to break off, of course. Good lord, yes. And that is when the tiny tip of the blade found its way inside Mr. Garrideb's pipe. The chances of that are 1,000,000 to 1. And yet there's no other credible explanation for how the tip of the blade ended up in your pipe. Then, after losing its tip, the knife ricocheted off the pipe and flew out of the open window. Ah. In short, this knife, which fell from the window of the Garrideb's house, is the very same knife that struck the victim in the middle of the back on the street below. Oh gosh, oh dear, oh no!
Objection!
Also, is his robe, like, burnt open from the back? That's what it looked like. Full-bodied theory, I'll give you that. Complex bouquet of seemingly trivial points plausibly arranged to create an almost passable vintage. Allow me to toast my learned friend's characteristically Nipponese approach to bottling his argument. Sorry? After all, if it is just a theory, the bottle, I fear, is corked. Because you see, it's spoilt by an insurmountable inconsistency. An insurmountable... what? Lord Van Zieks, explain yourself. What is this inconsistency you claim to have identified? An inconsistency of the simplest nature, my lord. The victim was found with the knife planted in the middle of her back. Yes, in her... That's right, you silly little man. Now, Joan, old thing, what are you getting so excited about? Let us consider the basic facts of the case once more. The victim was walking along the pavement before being stabbed in the back and falling to the ground. The knife that struck her had fallen from above. There's no possible way it could have planted itself in the victim's back, unless she was bent over picking up a book. Why are we reacting like this? This is like the easiest thing to figure out of the case, maybe so far. Right, you see, that's exactly right. If the knife had fallen on her from above, it would have struck her on top of her head. Well, He's lost for words. Look, I knew it. Never liked his theory in the first place. I don't know, though. What really did happen? It would appear the defense has made rather a spectacular blunder. If a theory has even one inconsistency, it cannot stand. Your theory, my learned friend, is history. It's not, though. She was bending over to pick up the book. Don't give me this. She was bending over to pick up the book that fell. Why are we even entertaining this? I was so sure we were on the right track. Because we are, she was bending over to pick up the book. But now the way has been blocked completely by just one simple inconsistency, with the simple explanation that she was bending over to pick up the book. Or in other words, we simply need to eliminate that one inconsistency and the theory will stand. Miss Susato, you mustn't worry, Mr. Naruhodo. You were just caught off guard, that's all, and your mind went blank. But if the path you are on is indeed correct, then a way will present itself. Like that she was bending over to pick up the book. The key to this is in the court record, I'm sure all the information you need is there. Since you have nothing to say, my Nipponese friend, well, your silence speaks volumes. A tacit acceptance that your theory is fatally flawed. His robe is burnt from the back. That's interesting. Hello, Fridays. I hope you're having a good evening. Means that I need to sharpen my mind and dig deeper for the truth. It's a test. It's going good. If the knife fell on the victim from above, there is no way that it could have hit her in the middle of the back. Under normal circumstances, that is. What are you implying? That she was bending over to pick up the book. This is like the easiest part of the whole case. I don't know why they're giving it this like big huge thing. There's a piece of evidence in the court record that can explain this inconsistency. That can explain how the knife that fell from above could have pierced the victim's back. We already have the answer. Goodness. Utter madness. Surely this must be the last time. Counsel, present the evidence of which you speak. This is the last inconsistency, the final piece in the puzzle. If I can successfully make sense of this, the truth will be laid bare at last. The evidence that explains how the falling knife became lodged in the victim's back is this book that she was bending over to pick up when the knife fell. This, the fourth book found at the scene, this is the final piece of evidence the defense will present. The burnt book. Is that not Mr. Garrideb's book? Yes, and to understand its significance, we have to consider how it came to be at the scene in the first place. This photographic print clearly shows the book in question, and the victim holding it in her hand. And as we all now know, it was the police constable that put the book between her fingers like that. Quite so, as part of his wholesale transplanting of the crime scene to the opposite side of the road. That's true, however, as part of his testimony, Constable Beat made an extremely enlightening statement on that point. Well, what made you place that book in the victim's hand? Oh, well, sir, that's because that's how I found it. When we first ran over to the scene, the victim was already holding the book. So when I moved everything, I made sure it was still in her hand. In other words, the victim had already picked the book up of her own volition. And clearly that must have been before she suffered the knife wound. Well, I should say so. After being attacked with a knife, I don't imagine she'd have been doing much of anything. So the question becomes, why did the victim have that book in her hand? By Jingo! What does Jingo even mean? a vociferous supporter of policy favoring war, especially in the name of patriotism. So basically, it's somebody who really likes war. I think I'm beginning to see what may have happened now. Oh dearie me. We know that the book fell from the top floor of the Garrideb household onto the pavement below, at precisely the moment that the victim was walking past. Yes, at exactly that moment, the young woman was walking along the street in the light fog, and all of a sudden, a book fell right in front of her. The book I threw. Yes, Mrs. Garrideb, and what do you think the woman did? What would you do if you were walking along and suddenly a book landed in front of you on the pavement? Well, I really can't imagine it, but I suppose she might have reached down and picked the book up. Yes, that is exactly what the woman in fact did. She picked up the book. Oh heavens! And when the woman reached down to pick the fallen book up, what position would her back have been in? That's right, facing the sky, completely and utterly defenseless. Then in the very next moment, while the woman was still bent over picking up the book... Ouch. The next object fell from the room above, the jackknife, straight into the middle of her back. And at that same time, walking by chance directly behind Miss Green, was the defendant, Mr. Soseki Natsume. Well, I never. It appeared to Mr. Natsume that the woman simply collapsed on the floor. In the dark and the fog, he didn't see the knife falling on her from above. Ah! And from the other direction, Constable and his wife saw no one but the victim and her apparent attacker. So there never was a real culprit to run from the scene in the first place. No, this was nothing more than a series of unlikely events that culminated in an unfortunate accident. And that is the real truth behind this case. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Garrideb, the very first time you showed me that knife, I had my suspicions. I wonder if perhaps it might have been something like that. I just noticed, is their name, like, their last name an anagram of Brigade? And he's like a military guy? That's interesting, that's neat. It's a neat little quirk. There, old bean. Poor Mrs. Garrideb. Of course, I never meant for anything of the sort to happen, but it was all my fault, wasn't it? I take full responsibility. I let my anger get the better of me, I threw that book, and I threw the knife as well. John, dear. It's alright, I know. I'm ever so sorry. Truly. I'm sorry. Oh, but dude has a bad knee, doesn't he? Yeah, I figured that might happen. I mean, how does this work, though? She was on the jury. The jury can't vote all 6 not guilty. Lord Van Zeeks, what news of Mrs. Garadeb? She's been taken to the infirmary. It would appear that today's events had left her in an especially flustered state. However, I believe she will recover in due course. There's no cause for concern. Yes, unbeknownst to themselves, they caused what could easily have been a terrible tragedy. They shall have to prepare themselves for the consequences of their actions. There is some good news, however, my lord. I've just had word from the hospital where the victim is being treated. Her condition is improving steadily, and the doctor believes she will regain consciousness soon. It's strange. We've been talking about the victim all this time, but we've never once met her. How wonderful. The woman is out of danger, it seems. Yes, that is good news. So, Mr. Soseki Natsume. Yes. Also, it's interesting his eyebrows are like, they look like hand-drawn or painted, as opposed to like the rest of him that's like, excuse me, you know, 3D modeled and textured. On behalf of my fellow countrymen, I would like to take this opportunity to beg your pardon, sir. You came from your distant eastern homeland to study our great British culture, and have been repaid with immeasurable unkindness. Please accept our heartfelt apologies. No, it is me who should be begging your pardon. Oh no, Mr. Natsume. That evening, when the young woman just collapsed on the pavement before my eyes, I jumped to the wrong conclusion again in my confusion. What conclusion, sir? I was sure that the woman was dead. Yes, Constable Beats had the same thing, didn't he? He thought she had been killed too. I suppose she must have looked completely lifeless. It's been about a year since I arrived in Great Britain now, but I still can't get used to life here. I can't relax. I'm sure there are evil spirits lurking in the fog, like they're haunting me. Poor Soseki-san, his imagination really has got the better of him. Yes, poor man. So when it happened, I thought the young woman had been taken by the fog spirits. I should never have dropped my books like that and run away. I should have called for help, for a doctor, for the police. Instead, I've managed to create a rift in the relationship of trust between our two empires, and for that, I am truly sorry. Wait, Garadeb took his wife's place in the jury. That shouldn't be allowed. Hold on, it looks like our stream's cutting out a little bit. Let me try a quick fix. I'm just gonna sit here for a second. Check if things are functioning. Come on, work with me. I'll try one more time, I think. Usually when I see that it starts working again, I'll see my like bitrate for like just a second jump up to like 12,000 kilobits per second. And then my bitrate will like go back to normal. Come on. Stream. Fix yourself. I don't want to like progress through dialogue and have people miss things because the stream's gotten out. There we go. Okay, we're back on track. You could indeed say that some sort of mischievous spirit has been at work here, I think. One that created a chain of unfortunate mishaps. We were befooled by this spirit and led to a false conclusion. Thanks to Lord Van Zeeks and our young lawyer here from the east, that chain has now been broken and the spirit exorcised. I heartily commend you both. Oh. Now then, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Yes, my lord. In concluding this trial, I must ask one last time for your decisions regarding the defendant's culpability. Are you ready to present your findings to the court? As the foreman of this jury, I can assure you we reached a fair and just conclusion. I do declare the truth can be extremely cruel at times. Well, I didn't suspect the woman next to me, that's for sure. Sitting in for the old bean while she's out of action, you know, but I know what her decision would be. Does this mean I'll finally be able to get out of here and start work? Well, it's about time. I say, I'll have a corker of a story to tell the grandchildren when I get home, won't I? Very well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I hereby demand your final decisions. Mr. Foreman.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
We did it! Yay! Very well, Mr. Soseki Natsume, I hereby pronounce you not guilty. Wahoo! And finally, Mr. Natsume. Oh, yes, Lord Sir. You are now a free man once more. It is my hope that you will continue to further your education in British culture. May you never again be brought before me. Oh, yes, sir, of course. On my life, I'll swear I'll never set foot in a courtroom again. I'm transported to tears. Thank you, counsels. Court is adjourned. Oh, locum. Wait, you mean me? Of course. Is there another locum here? Is there even one? Compared to the original locum student Mr. Naruhodo Esquire, your name has become rather short, hasn't it? What's wrong with using my actual name? Oh, at last! I'm free! Joyful, joyous, jubilant, jubilation! Heady, hearty, happiness, hurrah! Oh, I am pleased. Mr. Natsume is delighted. Would it be so hard to just say that? Just to say that, then? Locum, you did it! You saved me from the brink! Well, what happened to the poor woman was in no way your fault, after all. I'm just glad everyone can see that now. No, not that! Lovely, loyal locum lawyer! Yes? I mean, as I said before, I've just never got used to life here in Great Britain. Every time I look over my shoulder, I see foreigners, I see towering brick buildings. And from high up windows, I see them looking down on me, laughing. Look at that little hunchback. Oh dear, I'm sure it's all in your head, Mr. Natsume. But today, you, locum lawyer, gave my gloom the boot. You stood firm behind that baronial bench before all those babbling British. You battled to the bitter end, laying bare the baffling truth. And when I beheld the blinding fireworks among the beams of the Bailey's roof, I bellowed, There's a lot of alliteration going on. Behold the best barrister ever born. This is a real tongue twister. Well, that's very flattering, and we're very pleased for you. This has given me a wonderful anecdote to recount to my old friends back in Japan. An anecdote? Is this what's to become of all my hard work? Ah, there you are, my dear fellows. I apologize for keeping you waiting. I rose late this morning. Oh, Mr. Sholmes, what a pleasure to see you. I see I am here not a moment too soon. A disaster has been averted, I'm glad to say. Oh. The trial shall begin presently, Mr. Naruhodo, and I wish you the very best of luck. It's just finished. What? No, then my haste was in vain? Ah, it's you, Herlock Sholmes. Oh, have we met, sir? This is Mr. Natsume, the man you had arrested, Mr. Sholmes. Ah, I see. I failed to recognize you at first. Our previous encounters have taken place in the gloom. Either of your bleak lodgings or that prison cell. Simply couldn't place that curious face in the light. Charming. This is all your fault, Herlock Sholmes. You're the reason I had to go through this terrible ordeal. I'm going to give you a piece of my mind. My apologies, sir, but I assure you, I've placed you now. You're the fellow who abandoned that poor young lady and ran off, are you not? Ah. But you've been taken to the hospital more urgently. Feel perhaps you would have regained consciousness by now. Oh. But it was unavoidable, I'm sure. We are but human, after all. Anyone would have been shaken by such an experience. I do feel very badly about how I behaved. Well, never mind. Now then, what was it you wanted to say to me, sir? Nothing. Ah ha ha ha, priceless. Oh, I am sorry, really, but... That was quite priceless. Poor Soseki-san. Still, on the bright side, I had an extremely entertaining experience without paying a penny. I don't know if I would call being on trial entertaining. And it would seem you were not even found guilty. But there is no bright side. Whatever do you mean, Mr. Natsume? Even after this, I'm still cursed by the spirits and now by the Reaper. Ah, Lord Van Zieks. I haven't forgotten, you know, what facing that man in court means. Even if you're found not guilty, you're still doomed. It will be alright, Mr. Natsume. If the Reaper appears trying to make trouble, I will protect you. Hi-ya! With a perfectly executed Susato takedown. He is shaking. Much as I like being turned on my head, a bit of warning might be nice next time, Miss Susato. So, Mr. Natsume, what do you intend to do now? You mentioned something about recounting your experiences to your friends back in Japan. Yes, I intend to return to my homeland soon. Oh? It's already been a year since I arrived here in Great Britain. I've visited universities, libraries, bookshops. I've been honored with the tutelage of professors. I've learned so much about the wealth of literature here and the city it has shaped. And I have come to realize that it is my calling to sail home and tell my fellow countrymen about it. That's very touching, Mr. Natsume. Or in perhaps less veiled terms, You wish to withdraw halfway around the world to escape the terror of the Reaper's curse? That's not it at all. The more I learn of literature, the more this strange feeling claws at my insides. I feel compelled to return to my roots and attempt to pen a work of my own. Oh, I see. A work of literature by Soseki-san. Could be an interesting read. Wait a minute, is Soseki Natsume the name of an actual, like, Japanese author? I don't know why, but the name is, like, maybe setting something off for me. There is an actual Japanese novelist named Soseki Natsume. In 1900, the Japanese government sent Soseki to... This is about the real Soseki Natsume. In 1900, the Japanese government sent Soseki to study in Great Britain as Japan's first Japanese English literacy scholar. He visited Cambridge and stayed a night there, but gave up the idea of studying at the university because he could not afford it on his government scholarship. He studied instead at University College London. He had a miserable time in London, spending most of his days indoors, buried in books, and his friends feared that he might be losing his mind. He also visited Pitlochry in Scotland, where he lodged with John Henry Dixon at the Dundrock Hotel. He lived in 4 different lodgings. None on Briar Road. Only the last of these proved satisfactory. 5 years later, in his preface to Bungakuran, The Criticism of Literature, he wrote about the period. The 2 years I spent in London were the most unpleasant years in my life. Among English gentlemen, I lived in misery like a poor dog that had strayed among a pack of wolves. He got along well with Priscilla, who shared his love of literature, notably Shakespeare and Milton. His tutor at UCL was the Shakespeare scholar W.J. Craig, who also spoke fluent French, much to his admiration. The Leos were a Channel Island family, and Priscilla had been born in France. The sisters worried about Soseki's insipid paranoia and successfully urged him to get out more and take up cycling. Despite his poverty, loneliness, and mental problems, he solidified his knowledge of English literature during this period and returned to the Empire of Japan in January 1903. In April, he was appointed to the First National College in Tokyo, so he was given the lectureship in English literature, subsequently replacing Koizumi Yakumo. And then in parentheses there is Lafcadio Hearn. I don't know what that means. And ultimately becoming a professor of English literature at the Tokyo Imperial University, where he taught literary theory and literary criticism. Cool. It's a real dude. You know why this name is familiar to me? I think Soseki Natsume is like the answer to one of the quiz questions in Persona 4. Or a book he wrote is a thing that you have to answer a question about. Something like that. This is like, the dots are connecting in my brain very slowly. What's Lafcadio Hearn? Oh, Koizumi Yakumo, born Patrick Lafcadio Hearn, was a Greek writer. Okay, so basically he was the teacher at the Tokyo Imperial University beforehand. The Lafcadio Hearn thing is just his like birth name instead of Japanese name. What about Mr. Sato and yourself? Sorry, what about us? Will you return to Japan alongside your mustached compatriot? Why would we? A week has not yet passed since we arrived in London, and only now does it feel as though we have finally found our feet. And you are accommodated in a hotel at present, are you not? That's right, but we need to find lodgings before it bankrupts us. I calculated that we can only afford another 10 nights before our entire budget is exhausted. Well then, you can take my lodgings. Oh, the windowless room? But what it lacks in windows, it more than makes up for with a floor, a ceiling, and walls. Great. And of course, I'd be happy to leave behind the accursed evil spirit. Oh my, an evil spirit? Oh yes. It tries to suffocate you while you sleep. It's an infallible wake-up call. He's talking about the cat, isn't he? We'll think about it if that's alright. Perhaps I can offer a more welcome alternative. Would you consider taking lodgings with me? Really? Well, a vacancy has conveniently presented itself, though it is up in the attic, I might add. Are you sure it isn't just a storage loft? I spoke with the landlady this very morning on the matter of price, and Iris is cleaning the room as we speak. You must come at once. I presume you have no luggage to speak of. Oh, this is simply wonderful. What an honor to be invited to take lodgings in the great detective's office's attic. I'm too overcome for words. So suggesting we look elsewhere is out then. Then it's settled. Iris will prepare a welcome dinner this evening, and you must come too, Mr. Natsume, I insist. I don't know what to say, but thank you, and yes. Wonderful. Then I'll go and complete the paperwork for your formal release, Mr. Natsume. It shan't take long. Somebody's happy. Locum, I knew that you wouldn't let me down. I'm truly delighted to have met you here in London. Likewise, Mr. Natsume, it's been a privilege meeting you too. It's a shame that we're going to have to say goodbye so soon. Well, I've come to realize that I belong in Japan. But Locum, we'll meet again one day. Yes, I'm sure. Hopefully by then, I'll be a successful lawyer. Hopefully by then, I'll be a successful author. I think you will, Mr. Natsume. I think you will. Well, my dear fellows, our carriage appears to have arrived. Shall we go, Mr. Naruhodo? Yes, Mr. Sholmes. I have little doubt Mr. Natsume will be released in time for dinner this evening. And so, with Soseki-san's innocence successfully established, we rode with Mr. Sholmes to what was to become our new home, 221B Baker Street. The 20th of February, 4:41 p.m., the attic room. So this is to be our new office, yes. Our office. I really like the sound of that. Me too, it's simply wonderful, isn't it? I hope you can see this, Kazuma. It's only a small step. But I'd like to think we're getting a little closer to your dream now. So my dear fellows, do you like the place? Oh my god, seeing him without his hat and coat thingy. Ah, Mr. Sholmes, yes, thank you so much. It's a delightful room, Mr. Sholmes. I simply adore it. Good, I'm pleased to hear it. Iris and I are delighted to welcome you. I hope everyone's hungry. It's nearly time for dinner. We'll eat as soon as Mr. Natsume arrives. We have a lot to celebrate. Iris, you must let me help you. Alright then, Susie. You can be in charge of the salad. Splendid. So, Mr. Naruhodo, how does it feel to have your own office in the capital? It's very exciting, actually. Can't help wondering what adventures await us. Aha ha ha ha! Those were precisely my sentiments when I first established my office at this premises. Till I discovered the dark truth about the city of London, that is. Sorry. London is a glorious place full of wonder, opportunity, prosperity, and mirth. But the brightest of lights casts the darkest of shadows. Shadows? What do you mean? Well, I believe you're well aware of the murkiness that lies behind London's facade already. So, once again, Mr. Naruhodo, welcome to London. Ominous. Of course, at the time, I had no idea of the significance of those words Mr. Shalm so casually spoke. But it wasn't long before my turn came. To lift the facade and see the true depth of the murk that lay behind it. So I think the next case is the last one. At least for this first... Like, there's 2 games in the collection. This is just the first one. I might stop after the first one. Not that I'm not enjoying this, just to, like, change things up and keep things a little fresh. The Adventure of the Unspeakable Story. The Hound of Baskervilles. Isn't the, like, Sherlock Holmes story just the Hounds of Baskerville? A hound it was, but not such a hound as any mortal had ever seen. Its eyes glows with smoldering gaze. The whole of its ox-sized body was outlined in white-hot flames. The artwork for all of these is really, like, interesting. The Adventure of the Unspeakable Story.
It's coming! Sholmes's cry pierced through the thick wall of fog around us. Wisps of vapor flowed over the pistol as I cocked it, and I waited, breathlessly, in the stillness. The silence lasted for what seemed an eternity, until, at last, it appeared. From the shadows of the cloud, an enormous beast sprang out upon us. A hound it was, but not such a hound as any mortal has ever seen. Its eyes glowed with a smoldering glare. The whole of its ox-sized body was outlined in white-hot flames. Its rumbling pant and hideous howl, so terrified was I that I began to tremble with fear. "Look well, Wilson," Sholmes declared, gazing upon the mystical beast. "For this is the diabolical Hound of the Baskervilles."
Our first 2 months in London passed by in a flash. In that disconcerting courtroom experience we were first thrown into on the day we arrived in the country, and in Soseki-san's terrible ordeal that had followed closely behind, we had emerged victorious. However, there then came an abrupt end to our opportunities to appear in court, which was hardly surprising, of course, as I was nothing more than an amateur, an unknown student of law from a faraway land. So life in our little office was very quiet. That is, until it was shattered one day by that fateful telegram. "15th of April, 9:13 a.m. Naruhodo's Legal Consultancy." Whoops. I didn't mean to do that. Knock, knock, knock. That morning, I was woken by the unreserved knocking on the door by the telegram boy. But after he'd gone, Susato-san's behavior became very obviously strange. Susato-san? Yes. Is it time to leave for court already? Let me see. What case is it today? I don't think I'm scheduled to defend anyone at the moment, am I? Oh no, of course not. How silly of me. But I think Iris said she would make us breakfast this morning, so shall we go down to Mr. Sholmes' suite? Yes. Iris makes the most delicious breakfast food. She does, doesn't she? Once our bellies are full, we can leave for court in fighting fit form. Let me see. What case is it today? Here we go again. The telegram. So, what was it about? The telegram that was delivered this morning, I mean. Oh, a telegram? I don't know what you're talking about. Sorry, but you're not gonna get away with that. Well, I didn't think I would. Actually, don't give it a moment's thought. It's nothing. Nothing interesting. Boring, in fact. Ahem. It was just a boring old telegram. It's 3 times now she's tried and failed to convince me it was nothing. I promise that I'll tell you about it at some point. Alright, I understand. I suppose Soseki-san will have arrived back in Japan by now, won't he? Yes, I should think so. He left immediately after that terrible ordeal. Which would mean he should have completed the voyage already, or be just a few days away. A fortnight ago, we had that very long telegram from him, do you remember? Complaining of seasickness. But by and large, it seems the voyage has gone well. Is something wrong, Naruhodo-san? I was just wondering what might have become of Soseki-san had he stayed in London, that's all. You mean as regards Lord Van Zieks, the Reaper? Yes, I can't help wondering if seasickness would have paled into insignificance in that case. The Reaper. What is it they say? That no one who stands in the dock can be saved from the Reaper, right? Like the way that nightmarish trial ended on the very day we arrived in London. Even 2 months on, the cause of that dreadful fire is still a mystery. Yes, but at least Soseki-san is safely out of the country now. Presumably that means that the curse of the Reaper can only take effect within the confines of the city of London. Even if that's the case, it's a little comfort. I have a terrible sense of foreboding. If the legend of the Reaper is to be believed, it would mean he wields the sword of justice itself. Come to think of it, I wonder what he's been up to these past 2 months. Surely not wielding that sword against more acquitted defendants. No, I don't think so. Apparently Lord Van Zieks hasn't appeared in court once since our last encounter. Oh, yes, since Soseki-san's trial, he's withdrawn from judicial service again, it seems. Really? Just like before, when he wasn't seen in court at all for several years. It's just been me who's had to face him in this recent spate of trials, then. Just my luck. I wonder if luck doesn't come into it. Sorry, what was that? Oh, nothing, never mind. Just dropping hints at things that will be revealed very soon. Morning, Runo. Morning, Susie. Good morning, Iris. Iris? What is it, Runo? What is that terrible noise? It sounds like a cat being strangled. Ah, yes, you noticed that, did you? Hurley isn't in the best form for this morning, it seems. Hello. Hello, Mr. Sholmes? Good morning. A good morning to die, perhaps. Jeez. You okay, Sholmesy? Has something happened? You look miserable on the way you were playing the violin before. My analytical mind is dead. Music is dead. The world is dead. Damn this blanched existence. That's all it is, my dear fellow. Nothing of consequence. I'm afraid I don't understand. Well, Iris, isn't it time we ate? Some dry toast and insipid coffee for me. If it's not too much to trouble. Meow. Oh, hello. Oh look, it's Wagahai. Good morning, boy. Oh, that's so cute. Meow. That must be some sort of tiny door for cats to use. But how did it get there? Well then everyone, time for breakfast. Oh wonderful, let me help you, Iris. It would indeed be a fine day to die. Jeez. Come on, dude. I knew something looked different. Something's missing from Mr. Sholmes' desk. Wanting to die. You seem to be very unhappy this morning, Mr. Sholmes. What's happened? It used to be the case that in my hands is a violin sung like the dawn chorus. Its mellifluent tones would make flowers bloom. It would. But now, the muses are unamused with me. The goddesses of music have thrown me over. Whatever do you mean, Mr. Sholmes? For hours I have bowed, for days even. Through the nights I have endeavored to no avail. That sound, my tone, is lost. That brilliant, clear, unwavering tone. Gone forever. No more recitals of unbridled emotions. Well, you haven't been practicing much lately, have you, Hurley? Don't worry, I'm sure it'll come back to you in time. Heed my words, Mr. Naruhodo. The goddesses of the arts are fickle. One day they bestow genius on a man, the next they unmercifully withdraw it. Oh dear. Arg, why is this happening to me? If they take the turn I have for the violin from me, what is left, for pity's sake? What is left? Your career as a detective? Yeah, deduction, isn't that what you're known for? And the missing machine. Mr. Sholmes, I don't like to pry, but your desk looks rather empty today. Ah, well done, Miss Susato. Your observational skills do you credit. Oh no, Mr. Sholmes, they pale into insignificance when compared to yours. You'd struggle not to notice, wouldn't you? You mean Hurley's great analytoscope? That's at Windy Banks now. Sorry, it's at a Windy Bank? No, Windy Banks. The pawnbrokery. Pawn? What? You mean you pawned that enormous machine of yours? It has some considerable value, you see, quite undeservingly. But isn't it a very important machine for your work? I do wish you had consulted us if your situation had become so desperate. I should have gladly passed what little income I have to you. Dear Madame, things are far from desperate. But the pawnbroker has your wonderful machine. How could it be anything but desperate? Making use of a pawnbrokery is quite ordinary here in London, I assure you. It doesn't sound ordinary at all. It would seem that neither of you fully understand how pawnbroking works. Well, what's to understand exactly? How pawnbroking works. I mean, if it's how it works in the modern day US, it's just like taking out a loan with that item as collateral. So you can just go back and get your item back if you bring back the money. For a certain amount of time. After a certain amount of time, they'll sell it. What did you mean you said we didn't fully understand how pawnbroking works? To the people of London, pawnbrokeries are akin to banks. Banks? On Mondays, merchants relinquish their finest jackets and trappings to their pawnbroker of choice. With the money they receive in return, they are able to trade happily through the week. And then on Saturdays, they go to recover their things using the money they've earned. I had no idea. This has been a fascinating lesson for us. Everyone does it, you see, especially people in inner London. And should they have money to spare, they would purchase another fine jacket. Not to wear, obviously, but to pawn, should the need arise. Oh, how ingenious. So whenever we have something that's getting in the way, we leave it at Windibanks, you see. A pawnbrokery can be thought of as an extremely secure vault. Who would have thought that even pawnbrokers are different here in Great Britain? Of course, you have to watch Hurley with it. Sometimes he pawns things he really shouldn't. Don't you, Hurley? What does it matter? The world is dead to me now. Sheesh. Dude. I guess let's talk to her about Wagahai. Mr. Natsume's cat seems to have settled into his new home then. Oh yes, and I've become very attached to little Waggy. It would appear his previous owner has completely forgotten to him. Cats are unfeeling creatures. Their mews as empty as the hearts of the muses. Yeesh. If Mr. Natsume had no intention of taking Waggy back to Japan, I wonder why he kept him in the first place. I expect he would have taken him if he could, but pets are strictly forbidden aboard steamships in our experience. And for good reason. Terrible things can happen if the rules of passage are not obeyed. Well, I don't mind, because Waggy is adorable. Yes, he really is. Oh yes, what about the door? I don't remember seeing that tiny thing in the main door before. Where did that come from? Oh, you noticed? You are observant, Runo. Look, I used this. It's my latest invention. What is that? I call it the Cat Flip-O-Mat. Gosh, a machine for making doors just for cats? That's right, it can make a cat flap for a little furry friend like Waggy in seconds. And it can do it in any door at all, no matter what it's made of. It's very powerful, you see. Wouldn't it have been quicker just to make the cat flap rather than making a machine to make the cat flap? Well, yes, maybe, but now I can make cat flaps anywhere I like. Oh, I think it's wonderful. You must make one for us in the door of our office upstairs, Iris. She really knows how to come up with unconventional inventions, this girl. Wow. Oh, what was that? Wagahai? Clatter, clatter, screech. What was that? Oh no, Wagahai's tangled up in your violin. I think he thinks it's a toy. No, what's he doing to it? Oh dear, Mr. Sholmes' precious violin. Why should I care? What? I shouldn't be surprised. If the cat is a more accomplished musician than I now. Mr. Sholmes really is in poor spirits, isn't he? Well, anyway, I'll put it back where it lives, shall I, Hurley? Out of the cat's reach if possible. We should assess the damage. I assume this is the violin in question. This is the violin, is it? It's a Stradivarius, one of the finest violins in the world, made by the renowned Italian luthier Antonio Stradivari. Oh, I see. Doesn't really look like anything special to me. I happened upon it covered in dust, languishing in a pawn shop down a nondescript back alley. The broker had no idea of its value, so I was able to purchase it for a mere 55 shillings. How honorable of you. Until today, it has been my faithful companion in every great Paganini-inspired performance I have made. I ask you, is there reason to live in a world devoid of music, to tolerate this blanched existence? No! There is none. Mr. Sholmes? What, dear madame, what? My thoughts are preoccupied with fancies of release from this dull routine. Well, it's about the violin. It looks very different to normal, don't you think? Hmm? What do you mean, Miss Susato? Oh, Susie's right. Yes. The tone of the wood is completely different. And that's not all. I'm sure there was no crack here before. Wait, it's not even the right size, is it? What's this? I'm terribly sorry to have to tell you this, Mr. Sholmes, but that instrument isn't a violin at all. Then what? I believe it's an entirely different instrument called a viola. What? What? Oh, Mr. Sholmes, are you all right? You're right, you are quite right. This isn't my faithful Stradivarius. So what, pray, is this piece of stringed flotsam? Not your faithful performing partner, then? Ah, I see what must have happened. You do, Iris? This is just a simple mix-up. Sounds like Iris might be able to tell us exactly what's happening if we ask her. I bet what happened is that he pawned the thing, and then didn't get the same instrument back that he pawned. What do you mean by a mix-up, Iris? Well, you see, this viola, was at Windibank's until last week. At the pawnbroker's, not Mr. Sholmes' beloved musical partner. There is a proverb from the East with which you are no doubt familiar, my dear fellows. Always let a beloved child travel. Yes, indeed. So you sent your beloved violin to the pawnbroker in the hopes that it would experience personal growth? Oh, what a wonderful idea. Last week I pawned my great analytoscope in order to release my precious instrument. It would appear Mr. Windibank mistakenly furnished me with this tawdry fiddle instead. But my ears cannot be deceived by the hollow timbre of this piece of timber. No, but your every sense was deceived by the fact that it just had strings. Pshaw, a fine state of affairs this is, and why I always say, Mr. Naruhodo, never trust a pawnbroker, they will try to fiddle you every time. I guess you could say they fiddled him out of his fiddle. Ha 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 ha. But earlier you told us that you think of a pawnbrokery as an extremely secure vault. Come, Mr. Naruhodo, dilly-dallying will get you nowhere, sorry. Crunching your toast with that vacant aspect, pressing your coffee so obtusely. Are you not a little embarrassed by your own conduct, considering the urgency with which we are faced? We must visit Mr. Windibank's brokery at once. That's right, isn't it, Mr. Sholmes? Precisely, Miss Susato. Without a moment's delay. But I haven't finished my bacon and eggs. My dear fellow, surely you do not still intend to crunch your bacon with an increasingly vacant aspect to press your egg ever more obtusely. Alright, say no more, let's go then. Don't worry, Runo, I'd be happy to heat it up for you again later. Oh, thank you, Iris. Did they have refrigeration at this point? I feel like they must have, but I don't know. As it happens, I am rather curious to see what a British pawnbroker's looks like. And we will see what that looks like next time, because I gotta go for the night. Fridays, thank you for hanging out for however long you have been here. Plasticop, thank you again for the 7 months. It means a lot. And I will see y'all on Wednesday for hopefully more Persona, but if Persona continues to not work, we'll probably just play some Yu-Gi-Oh! Or some Final Fantasy XIV. And I will get on getting a new computer to stream from so that we should be able to pick up Persona next week if I am not able to do so. Or if it continues to not go well on Wednesday. But I will see you then. I will talk to you then. I'll see y'all next time.